Oh, hold on. There's everybody. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting on Monday, April 6th. We welcome everybody for tuning in this evening. To begin, just to start, Joe Layton is going to read a little disclaimer regarding the format for tonight's meeting.
Okay, thanks. This meeting is being held virtually through Zoom. People that join the meeting are set so their microphones are muted. So that the meeting can occur in an orderly fashion, we ask that people who join keep their microphones on mute so background noises do not interfere with the meeting. Should any member of the public wish to speak, we ask that you use the raise hand or chat box to let staff know they will be recognized. Staff will monitor the chat and inform the chair of individuals that wish to speak. After speaking, we request the participant return their microphone back to mute.
Great. Thank you very much, Joe. So tonight's agenda begins with the organization Pledge of Allegiance and a reading of the mail. At 6:35, we're going to have department board updates, beginning with staff updates on COVID-19, unified command, consideration of vote to extend cancellation of board committee physical meetings, consideration of vote to extend the order to close all buildings under the care and control of the Board of Selectmen. The interim director, interim elder human services director, transfer station leaf drop, emergency staffing policy, consideration of vote extending emergency staffing policy, general discussion regarding COVID-19. At 6:50, we will have public input and members updates. At 7 o'clock, we're going to have a joint meeting with the Finance Committee and Cheryl Herrick-Stella, Finance and Budget Director, and our town accountant, regarding the fiscal year 2019 audit presentation by Melanson Heath, spending freeze. Stephen Udy, the town administrator, is going to review House 4586 regarding tax collections. At 7:20, we're going to discuss the annual town meeting and annual town election. At 7:25, we're going to discuss Littleton Apothecary. At 7:30, proposed amendments to section SR 8-1 VB of the earth removal regulations. 7:45, 9 Air Road discussion of soil removal activities. 8 o'clock, EHS Director screening process. 8:15, the town administrator is going to give a report on the April-May meeting schedule, Nagog Hill Orchard, consideration of lease extension, 64 Spectacle Pond Road soil removal decision, update of the Shradi Side Temple nuisance complaints, notice of intent for the Reuben Hoare Library Conservation Commission filing, and an act to address the challenges facing municipalities and state authorities resulting from COVID-19. We're going to review our minutes, and then we're going to enter into executive session at the end of the meeting. Thank you. So we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Chair, if you could lead us.
I'm not sure what the protocol is here, but I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to start off with department board updates. Nina, if you could lead us with that.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. We have a number of items here that are listed. The first item for Unified Command, we're actually, with the board's support, we're actually suggesting that we can pass on that item and return to it at a time in the future, perhaps when the pandemic has passed, and coordinate future ideas and thoughts on Unified Command. I'll pause there in case board members don't wish to pass over it.
Any comments from the board? No. I think we're good.
Thank you. The next item is the public meetings. As the board knows, we had a vote back in March at the March 13th meeting, where the board voted to basically discontinue all in-person meetings and considering the fact that the in-person meetings and the closure of state buildings and municipal buildings has extended through May 4th, we thought it would be prudent to present a motion to also discontinue public meetings in person through that same time frame.
Okay. To coincide with the governor's most recent order.
Right.
Okay. So we have a motion for that?
We do, and Judy is doing a great job pulling stuff up.
All right, perfect.
Okay, then I'll move that all meetings are postponed until further notice or subject to approval by the Board of Selectmen, with the exception of meetings to be held by the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Health, and that all other public meetings may occur virtually, and that any posted meetings may be continued subject to the applicable provisions of the Mass General laws.
Second.
One minor modification. The technical minor area here is that it's all posted hearings may be continued. If you would modify your motion, Chase, if you'd be willing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll modify the motion accordingly.
Your second, if you'd be so willing.
Second.
Oh, thanks, perfect.
Okay, perfect. So the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? This is a roll call vote. Chase?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Chuck? He's muted.
He typed aye.
He did. Okay, aye. I didn't see that. Thank you. And Joe is arriving late to the meeting. I should have announced that at the beginning, and I am an aye, so perfect. And the next item, Nina?
Thank you. The next item is to also similarly extend the order to close the buildings under the care, custody, and control of the Board of Selectmen through May 4th.
You ready for a motion, Cindy?
Yep, please.
Yeah, I'll move that the Board of Selectmen order all buildings under the care, custody, and control of the Board of Selectmen be closed to the public through May 4th.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Chase?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Chuck? Aye. Myself, aye. Perfect. Thank you, Nina. Next
Thank you.
item.
That's the Interim EHS Director, and Cindy, please feel free to chime in. Appreciated your support through the process with just getting things off the ground and working with Nicole and Marge's support on that as well. As the board knows, we are presenting a motion for the appointment of Miss Nicole Lorenzen as the Interim EHS Director. Nicole is quite uniquely qualified, considering that not only she's worked in the department for a number of years, but also she served as a interim while Miss Liz Trediak, the outgoing EHS Director, was on maternity leave. Cindy, I don't know if you have anything else to add. That
I don't have anything more to add than that. I really appreciate Nicole wanting to step into this role at this time, especially under the circumstances that we're facing as a community and globally. So I think she's going to do a wonderful job. She's been in that position, and she did at one time serve as interim director when former director Pamela Campbell had resigned. So I think she'll be a great fit, and looking forward to supporting her in that role.
I don't know if the board would like to ask Nicole to say a few words. I know she's on mute, so if we wanted to ask her, Joe would have to release her from mute, perhaps.
Here someplace.
Yeah.
There you are.
Hi. As you and Cindy both mentioned, I have filled in before. The department has changed so much, but I'm happy to support it however I can. And you know, I'll do you proud. We're working with all of the residents. We have a high risk list. We're getting in touch with them every day during this time. And so if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Does anyone have any questions for Nicole?
Thank you for stepping up, Nicole.
Thank you.
Great.
So if
Thank
we
you
didn't-
so much, Nicole. Oh, sorry, Chase. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to make a motion. So you tell me if you're ready for it, Cindy.
Sure, certainly. Thank you
Okay.
very much, Nicole.
Oh, thank you.
Then I'll move that the Board of Selectmen appoint Nicole Lawrenson, the current Assistant EHS Director, as the interim Elder and Human Services Director, effective the close of business on Friday, April 3rd, 2020.
Second.
Perfect. Motion's been made in second. Any further discussion? No. Roll call vote, Chase?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Chuck?
Aye.
Cindy? Aye. Perfect. So the motion is passed. Thank you very much. Is the next item, Nina?
Thank you. Yes, the next item is the transfer station leaf drop-off. The Board of Selectmen's office, as the board knows, has received a number of inquiries. You yourselves have received them as well. And residents are asking for the opportunity to drop off leaves. And I will defer to Joe, our Assistant Town Administrator, because he's been in close contact with our DPW Director on this particular issue. I don't think Chris is on the call today.
No. Thanks, Nina. So as was stated, we've had a number of calls come in, as well as emails inquiring about the transfer station and not accepting leaves. I was on a phone call with Chris Stoddard this afternoon, and basically, because leaves as well as other material, branches, brush, which are charged and usually transacted with an employee, because they wanted to eliminate any instances where there was direct interaction with the employee and handling of transactions. There was just some concern how it would get monitored. And while we could state that we're accepting leaves, there is the potential that there could be brush and branches and woody material that is deposited rather than just leaves, which then would have to be sorted and eventually then chipped in order to be disposed of.
So if I may jump in here, Cindy.
Sure.
So great summary, Joe, and having had those conversations with Chris as well. I know that in order to operate this effectively, we're not going to be able to practice social distancing if in fact they do have to collect fees from residents in order to drop down there. They won't be able to police it effectively. And it's essentially, it's going to be costly to the town down the road if we have to. It's not going to be composted leaves, if to Joe's last point there, if it's brushy material and materials other than leaves and grass essentially. But I know that anytime we ask Chris to get something done, he gets it done. So with everybody being kind of locked down and staying at home, a lot of people with days like today and tomorrow looks to be a good day, and we've had a couple of good weekend days. A lot of people are doing a lot of work in their yards, and that's the impetus of folks calling us and saying, "Hey, we're doing a lot of work in our yards. What can we do with the material now that the transfer station is kind of locked down to just purple bags and recycling?" I think to go into this slowly is probably the best approach, and I personally would support Chris by kind of standing down right now, ask people to kind of, gather the materials at their homes. And then as we are further able to assess the situation, then we could maybe make some alterations to our current situation to afford folks the opportunity to bring stuff down to the transfer station. But as it is right now, we don't have the resources, and we want to try to be sure to demonstrate that social distancing and not put any of our employees in harm's way. So I support Chris and kind of holding off for right now.
I agree. Do any other board members have comments?
None for me, Cindy.
Okay, thanks, Chase.
I did just want to draw to the board's attention that Chairman Joe Knox did join the meeting.
Hi, Joe.
It's moving pretty quickly with Cindy running the meeting, just saying.
I don't know if he's on. I see him.
See him. It doesn't look like he hears us, though.
No. Might be intentional.
I think he might have to step out. So maybe Cindy, if just until we hear from him, maybe you should continue to run the meeting.
Sure.
Not trying to be funny for a change.
No, perfect. Nina, is there any action we need to take on that?
Not at this time, unless the board wishes to take action.
No.
But I think you've discussed you don't wish to.
Perfect. And the next item?
Thank you. The emergency staffing policy, the consideration to vote to extend the emergency staffing policy. When the board had initially voted the staffing policy, it was through April 7th, if I'm not mistaken. And at this point in time, of course, we're very close to April 7th. And it would be, assuming the board is in agreement, it would be important to extend that date through May 4th, consistent with the other changes in terms of building closures, public meetings in person.
Okay. That makes sense. And do any comments from the board on that, on the extension? I don't believe so.
The only thing for the board to consider that is in that policy is that by extending it through May 4th, just confirmation or discussion to confirm that also includes the payment of individuals whose work has, been postponed due to the fact that we've closed certain programs. And again, that was a handful of bus drivers and one employee, one other employee in one other department that I won't identify unless board members wish for me to identify that person.
My only question with this is, would those folks be eligible for unemployment and made whole if we furloughed them, for lack of a better word?
I would defer to our HR administrator who's on the call, Ann Essman. If I may, Madam Chair, through you, ask Joe to unmute her.
Certainly.
I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, you can furlough them, but they will not, quote, be made whole. Usually on unemployment, they would receive about 50% of their normal wage.
Okay. Thank you, Ann.
Mm-hmm.
Does the board have any initial comments on that? Is this something that we want to discuss now, or do we want to? Well, we really need to take it up now, correct, Nina?
We are holding payroll at this point, correct, until tomorrow based on a number of different factors. So we would need to know by the end of this meeting. Is that correct, Ann?
That's correct.
Okay. Personally, I have no problem extending it past the original deadline that we had set up through May 4th. But I think after May 4th, we do need to have a discussion what we're going to do going forward in that regard.
That discussion has to happen prior to May 4th, so we're not in the same situation where we have to make a decision right now. But I think we made this decision a few weeks ago, anticipating that in all likelihood we would have to extend it. So I don't see any issue with us extending it, but continuing the conversation.
I'm with you, Cindy, on the qualifiers that you put in. I don't like the idea of even contemplating having to take a step back or part of a step back from this, but it may be necessary at some point. And we're going to have harder discussions about this on May 4th if we're in a similar situation.
Right.
Or before May 4th, to Chuck's point.
Right. Okay. But any other comments from the board?
I'm in agreement.
Okay. Nina, I think we're ready for a motion.
And I'll move that the board vote to extend the Town of Littleton's emergency staffing policy with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic through May 4th, 2020.
Second.
Motion's been made and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Chase?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Chuck?
Aye.
And is Joe still, do we lose Joe Knox?
Yeah, I'm texting back and forth to resolve the technical issues he's having.
Okay, perfect. So I am in favor of that motion. Aye. And the next item, Nina?
Thank you. This is a topic for general discussion regarding COVID-19. Should board members wish to discuss any specific items? Obviously, with this large of an issue, there are probably topics that the board wishes to discuss. One thing I would throw out there that you may want to discuss is a letter to the DPH, and I would defer to you, Chairwoman, and or our member Glavy on that. And then I would also tell you that we have at least one department update that would like to be given once the board has gone through its own discussion on any COVID-related matters.
Certainly. Thank you, Nina. I can give an update on at least some conversations that I had over the past couple of days with Congresswoman Lori Trahan's office regarding in follow-up to our joint meeting that we had last week on this situation specifically with respect to the Life Care Center. I know that her office has been in contact with the Department of Public Health and the Governor's Command Center regarding the situation at the Life Care Center. They were informed last Thursday that someone from the Department of Public Health had indicated them that they were bringing in an outside investigator to visit the facility and review the current situation there and bring back an assessment of what they found. They said that they were doing that immediately. That was late last Thursday night. Congresswoman Trahan's office followed up with the DPH today to get more information about what exactly that means and when we could expect that person or persons to arrive at the Life Care Center. And they had still, by the end of the day today, not received a response back to their follow-up inquiry regarding that report. What the Board of Selectmen has done in the interim is we have sent a letter to the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, as well as we sent it to the Commissioner, as well as the Division of Healthcare Facility Licensure and Certification, notifying them of the situation at the Life Care Center and just asking them for their assistance, basically telling them that we're frustrated because there's only so much action that we can take and that we need help. So that's where it stands at this time. And I just wanted to add, while we're discussing this situation, my sincerest appreciation and the board's sincerest appreciation for our first responders team, specifically Fire Chief Scott Wadzinski, Chief of Police Matthew Pennard, for the outstanding over and above actions that they've taken responding to this situation. And I know I speak for the whole community. We can't thank them enough, sincerely. So we're looking for, it's a minute by minute situation. We were talking about the letter that we were drafting, and we drafted it and 2 hours later something would change. So we got the letter sent, and we're looking forward to receiving a response and really continuing to push to address that situation specifically. Does anyone else on the board have anything they'd like to add?
I'd just like to expand on that real quick, Cindy, just so everybody watching knows. The letter is simply the formalized version of the communication that's been going on repeatedly with DPH over the last several days through, starting in the middle of last week. I think there was a little bit of confusion when we originally met, when we met on Saturday to discuss this, and wanted to make sure folks knew that we weren't simply writing a letter and hoping someone responded to it. It's the letter is simply the last piece of communication to go into place.
And just to add, and I agree, thank you for pointing that out, Chase, not fully trusting in how things are handled by bureaucracy. The point of the letter is to document either conversations, as you say, we've already had, or issues we've raised with them, so that, there's accountabilities.
Correct.
I assume the board would like the letter to be posted to the town's website and sent out via social media to the community, so the community can see that information, or is there some format that the board would prefer?
Well, if I may, so one of the things that we've actually been actively working on, Chase and myself with Joe Layton and the IT department, is updating the town's website. And so there's now a new section where that letter, I think, could be incorporated in there. I know Joe Layton is actively working on this with IT, and there's going to be more changes made tomorrow. But right. I don't see any problem. I think we should publish the letter, but and add it to the website. I think that would be helpful.
I agree.
Okay, we'll put it on the website. Great.
Chuck, do you have any comments?
No, I appreciate everybody. It's kind of all hands on deck here, and your initial comments, Cindy, just thanking everybody that's in on our front lines, including the police and fire, both chiefs, as well as the light and water department and the highway department, and all of our town employees are working under different conditions, as we're all kind of doing, in right now. So everybody's kind of trying to adapt to the new normal, and it's very much appreciated. At least from my perspective, I think I could speak on behalf of the whole board, and just I appreciate everybody doing their part, pitching in, and for the residents, hopefully having some patience, understanding that we're trying to figure this out as well, and we're trying to make decisions in the best interest of the public and the public health as a whole. So,
right. And Joe Knox, can you hear us now? Are you all set?
Yeah, I'm all set. If it's okay, I'll have you keep on running the meeting in case I have to go in and out.
Okay, certainly. You're welcome. Did you have anything you wanted to add to this topic, or?
I don't even know what the topic is.
Oh.
I just get on.
No, that's all right. It's just a general discussion about the COVID-19 situation.
You can just say you agree with Chuck.
I agree with Chuck.
Oh, boy. Perfect.
Cindy, I do have one thing when you want to get to it. It's separate from the Life Care Center discussion. So.
Oh, sure. If you want to.
Okay.
Speak down, Chase. Yeah.
Yeah, this is related to the email that Nina had forwarded to everyone earlier regarding trailhead congestion. I essentially noticed there's a lot of folks, particularly at Oak Hill, but just at some of our conservation areas in general, which is generally a great thing, but wanted to know what we could possibly do to further eliminate congestion at trailheads. It sounds like, my understanding is the police department put some notices on some of the right around the corner from Oak Hill, where some essentially dangerous parking was occurring because there were a lot of folks there. The conservation department has put up in those locations, or they're going to put up notices with QR codes so people can scan and figure out where other trail locations are in town. In other words, if they can't park there and they want to go someplace else, where there are other options. My understanding is through Amy Green that she's reached out to Jim Gareffi to see if he has any issues with the number of people using the open space. He doesn't have any current issues, but minimizing that congestion at the trailhead, particularly Oak Hill, and any other heavily used trailheads would be a good thing. So essentially, it sounds like there are various steps in place to try and minimize that trailhead congestion, but we need to possibly using the updated website to encourage people to use other less utilized conservation spaces, because there's a lot of space out there. It's just that we're seeing a lot of people at select ones, and if problems begin to arise, we may have to take more severe actions, which I don't think anyone really wants to do. Right. The one action that I think the board might contemplate taking, and I'm sorry this is just coming up, it's going to be a little bit surprising to you, is possibly considering requiring dogs to be on leashes in the conservation lands that the Board of Selectmen has care, custody, and control of. That would bring the town's expectations in line with what the Conservation Trust is doing on their property. And I would suggest it makes sense as a short-term measure during the time when the governor has the emergency declaration active, so that we don't have people with dogs who are interacting with people who are not their owners, and so on. Another small thing that we can do to minimize any problems, particularly because we're seeing a lot of people use that conservation space and we want to make sure that it remains available to us.
Right. So I do believe that the town currently has a leash law town-wide that would also cover any trails under the care, custody, and control of the Board of Selectmen. Am I?
My understanding is the bylaw reads leashed or under voice control.
Oh, okay.
I believe you're right.
I could be wrong about that though, and I would certainly
I think you're
defer
right.
I would defer to the town clerk if she's got it available.
No, you are.
I think you are correct about that, Chase.
Okay.
So we can look at that and follow up on it and see what changes we need to make, if any, discuss it.
But otherwise, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Chief Kennard here. Yeah, and yes, you are correct on that. Voice command or on leash. We've had a couple issues up at the Oak Hill property already, and then we've been trying to educate the public in regards to that.
Okay.
Is that something that we could do tonight to modify that for during the duration of the emergency order? Or is that something that we should take up at another time?
As for your suggestion would be to modify the bylaw in some way, please?
Yeah, somehow require it to simply be dogs on a leash rather than leashed or under voice control.
I think we would need town council's guidance on that because I'm not sure how we could do that without a vote of town meeting.
Yeah, I figured.
Can we put a temporary order in place?
I'm not sure. I mean, you could, there's nothing that would stop the board from taking a vote that we can't. So because the board is meeting this evening, the board could vote to put something temporary in place, subject to approval by town council, just subject to codification by town council in some way to make sure that it's something we have the authority to do. And then, of course, if it's not, we can come back and discuss it at a later time.
I think that can make sense. And it could also make sense to ask town council to look into the Board of Health's ability to do that, given the extenuating circumstances we have, and perhaps have them take it up at their meeting on Wednesday.
I like that suggestion, Chase. Any other?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in real quick. So
Sure.
we took an action on 300 King Street, which is not under the care, custody, and control of the Board of Selectmen. And we asked the police department and the highway department to place a sign, the highway sign out there saying that facility was closed. I don't see any problem with us printing up signs and putting them at the trailheads and just putting that directive up there. And if, they are under the care, custody, and control of the Board of Selectmen, and it is extenuating circumstances. And I'm kind of the beg forgiveness philosophy here. Let's take action now because there are more people utilizing the locations and put some measures in place that hopefully will mitigate any kind of a confrontation or folks that are violating the current bylaw. It's tough to police, so that's the biggest challenge. But if we can do our best to try to mitigate it by putting signs up, we can't be out there policing and making sure that people are on have their dogs on leashes. But we can certainly put the signs up. Chief,
Chief turned on his camera. We're in trouble now.
I did. No, Chuck, I totally agree with you. We have had some issues down there, and that's how I'm so well versed in regards to the voice leash, I guess you could say. I think it'd be highly recommended by the police department if we could make some signs stating, at least until May 4th, that we do recommend everybody leash their dog while they're on the property. Until we can look into that further, I would support you 100% and the whole entire board in that regards.
Okay,
So, and Cindy, this is Joe. If I could just add one other thing.
sure.
We did get a comment from Alicia today that people can also refer to the community connections through the town of Littleton website to see all the trails that are available, so that people can spread out and use our various trails and maybe even learn new ones.
Okay, wonderful. So which trail specifically are we referring to for this ordinance? Because as Chase had mentioned, under the conservation already has that restriction in place, correct?
The Conservation Trust does. The land that the Conservation Trust controls, dogs must be leashed.
Okay,
So it would be any, and I don't have a list of parcels available to me, but any parcels that the Board of Selectmen has care, custody, and control of,
okay,
which in particular, and what is uniquely salient here is Oak Hill.
okay. Perfect. So do we want to have a motion tonight to that effect?
I mean, can we just direct Amy and Matt to put their heads together and come up with the strongest wording possible that is compliant with the law?
Sure. Any objection to that from the board?
I'm okay with stronger language than that, but that's
you just want the strongest wording possible.
right.
Unleash
Then
the
beg forgiveness.
Sure.
Okay. So I have Amy and Joe Layton.
Chief
What did you
Bernard.
say, Chase?
I suggested Amy and Chief Pinard, but yeah, we
Oh,
should
perfect.
probably involve Joe too.
All right, that's perfect. If you don't mind working on that. Joe, coordinating with Amy and the chief?
Sounds good.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you all for indulging that topic that was a little unposted.
Yeah. All right, perfect. So any other discussion on COVID-19 with the board?
I know we have some departments who wish to give updates. Perhaps through you, Madam Acting Chairwoman, we could also start with the police and fire chief in case they have anything additional before we go to open it up to other departments.
Sure. Is Chief Wodzinski, would you like to begin?
Sure. I'll just give a quick recap. It's been quite a week. We opened the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center at the fire department last Wednesday, as things at the nursing home kind of increased or intensified. And there, Chief Pinard, myself, our deputy chiefs, Nina and Joe joined us down there, fielding multiple phone calls, conference calls, dealing with the politicians and just the situation in general at that location. Our crews have been responding to multiple calls to that facility, as in addition to different locations across town. I know there are a lot of people that are, asking about addresses and whatnot. In general, it is in town. It's not just at the nursing home. There's multiple locations across town, and that's really all anybody needs to know. And it's a varying time. They do their 14-day quarantine, and then they come off that list. And some of the residences have begun coming back off that list starting today, in fact. So they're no longer a threat as everybody continues to heal from this virus. But it is still something that is in our town. It continues to spread. All of our members, everybody that's on the ambulance is in full PPE, full Tyvek suit, booties, gloves, face mask, hood, eye protection, and we take it extremely seriously. And it's all about our protection as much as it is for the protection of everybody out there. And we'll transport to a medical facility, and then we decon and we go backwards, clean out our ambulance. Everybody gets cleans off their suit, remove their suit, and they shower, put on new uniforms every single time. And this has been very successful for us. As I'm very happy to say that there are no members in the fire department that have gotten sick. So we're all really working diligently at staying that way. And again, for everybody that's out in the public, wash your hands. Like the governor says, wear your mask. And the biggest thing about your mask, when you wear it, it keeps your hands from touching your face. You don't touch your mouth, your nose, your eyes. It's huge. And wash your hands. Use the antiseptic on your hands, and keep them away from your face. If you touch something, wash them. And if you there you go, Chuck. And if you stay with that, you know, it's a good, safe practice. And everybody can do that. People out, you know, everybody's out in the community. That's great to get the fresh air, but over the next few weeks, it's going to be crucial. Heed the warnings, stay home if you can, be strategic if you have to go out to the stores to get food. But other than that, if people have questions, they can feel free to call or send an email. We're going to, we'll be working with Kirby to try to do a couple little PR things and you know, a few more updates on the cable channel. But everybody is staying as safe as they can, and we'll continue. So just try to heed the warnings, pay attention to what the governor says. The CDC, the DPH, they're very reliable. We're all going off the same sources. So really check out those websites and watch the updates.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chief. And one thing I just wanted to maybe add is how grateful are we for the state-of-the-art fire department, fire facility, emergency response facility that we have in the town of Littleton, especially at this time. I can't imagine operating under these circumstances if we had not updated and improved that facility as was needed.
Yeah, it's very much appreciated.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again. Thank you for all that you're doing, sincerely, just over and above. And our thoughts and prayers are with you and your department. We'll get through this as a community, and that you and everybody stays safe and stays healthy. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Chief Pinard, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, the only thing I would like to add is when people see the police, if you call them and they show up with masks on, don't be afraid. It's for our protection, it's for your protection. We're just trying to stay happy, healthy, and safe as we protect our community.
Great.
That's all. But thank you.
Thank you. Alicia, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to do a quick update for Parks and Recreation.
Can I jump in real quick, Alicia? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, our thoughts and prayers are certainly with all the employees, but Cindy specifically, you know, said that to the fire chief. The police chief is obviously dealing with some stuff down at LPD HQ, and he's really kept us abreast of the situation with some of the folks down there being sick. So our thoughts and prayers are with you guys as well, Chief Bernard, and thank you all. I mean, all the department heads that are giving updates, everybody, like I said before, that are pitching in, but you know, the folks that are on the front lines, Chief Wodzinski and Chief Bernard, thank you very much, and please extend that to your staffs and your departments as well.
Right. Thank you, Chuck.
Mm-hmm.
Alicia?
All right.
All right, Alicia.
That's okay. So I just wanted to give a quick update on a few things. Our part-time staff that we've had for our RISE program and for our April vacation, we did have a park commission meeting, and we've furloughed those staff. And they also made a decision to support if they decide to, how do I want to say, move forward with trying to do unemployment claims. So just wanted to let everyone know that that was what the Park Commission decided that they wanted to do. And I also wanted to give an update on the Community Connections website. So this is something that I've worked with Nicole Lawrenson and Amy Green to put together, which is going to be information on all of the departments for human services. So if anybody has questions about any of some of these things, like you guys had mentioned issues with trails, this has a list of all the trails in town. It's a really great resource to use. And it's right on the Town of Littleton website, as well as the Parks and Rec website. So please use that. And we also have a lot of information updated constantly on our Facebook page. So we've started doing virtual programming, and we started doing neighborhood competitions and virtual competitions. Like we have a new one that just rolled out, which is it's hashtag quarantine 01460. So it's a really great thing to be involved in, and we're seeing how families are doing, trying to keep everybody connected in this time where it's a really important to still foster those social connections, but it's a really difficult time to do that. So we've all been working really hard to try to make those opportunities for folks. So that's kind of my quick update on everything. So there you go.
Great. Thank you so much. Are there any other department heads on the video call that wanted to give an update or anything? Nope.
If you raise your hand, yeah, Ed, it looks like Ed.
Mr. Mullen. Can we unmute Ed?
Yeah, I'm just in the process trying to find him.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Hi,
Can you
Ed.
hear me now?
Yeah.
So as far as essential employees go, the governor has mandated that we continue to do our inspections for any new homes and construction or commercial work. So we're going strong. We've worked out a system with our plumbing inspector where I actually go out and Zoom meeting him for every inspection. I walk through the buildings for plumbing inspections. He observes everything and tells me where to point the camera. It's pretty effective. It's been efficient. My staff, it's been great. It's a little bit of role reversal now. I scan documents and send them off to them so they can continue to work. So I'm the one pulling files now and scanning documents, but we're working as a team. We're working well. And I just want to give kudos to Janet Fairchild because she's also the admin for Board of Health and ZBA. And with all the work that's been going on with Board of Health, she's been inundated with calls and work to do. And she's really stepped up. And I just want to give a shout out to her for all the extra work and hard work she's doing.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ed. Thanks for that update. Is there anyone else that wanted to speak? Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you all for what you're doing. We sincerely appreciate everything, working through these trying circumstances. Nina, is public input and members updates?
Yes.
Next? Okay, perfect. So we'll start with members of the board. Are there any members updates? We'll start with you, Chase.
Went to the grocery store 9 days ago. That's about it. That's all I got.
Oh, yeah. Perfect. Paul, do you have anything to share?
My cat likes having me home.
Perfect. Joe?
I'll say here.
Great. Chuck, do you have anything?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, great. I do not have anything to share this evening, so we will open it up for public input.
And just for organizational purposes, I don't know what you're thinking, Joe. Were you thinking just type into the chat box and we'll unmute you?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So we'll wait a few moments while if folks have any questions that they can at least ask to be unmuted so that we can take up any questions. And if in a few moments we don't see any questions, we will continue to move on with our regular agenda. Sure, Joe's working on this.
So just a question. We do have just a question that entered into the chat box asking for timeframes of any response from DPH.
So I can respond to that just based on the discussions that I had with Congresswoman Trahan's office today. Like I said, they have been informed that someone was going to be sent out to the facility, quote, immediately to assess the situation. Her office was not able to get a response from the DPH today regarding that information, and we just sent our letters out today. Certainly, we hope that we will receive a response tomorrow. If not, we will certainly do the proper follow-up phone calls.
Okay, and then one last thing, because we have a couple people that are here by phone and not by way of computer or smart device, and therefore they can't text into the group chat. If they hit *6, it will unmute them if they did want to ask a question or make a comment. And at least I'm not seeing any of those phone numbers come off mute.
Okay. Are you seeing anything else, Joe?
No.
Okay, great. All right, perfect. So we will move on to our next agenda item, which is a joint meeting with the Finance Committee and Cheryl Herrick-Stella and Finance Budget Director and the Town Accountant.
And
Go ahead.
sorry, I just want to make sure if there are any Finance Committee members, if you can just say to unmute you in the chat, just so I can make sure I'm unmuting the correct people.
Looks like Tom Perrell, just let's go through a logistical thing right now. Looks like Tom Perrell is unmuted. Betsy is not. I don't want to mispronounce Betsy's last name. Bowling.
Mhm.
And then Greg Champney.
Okay, I'm going through and just unmuting.
I don't see anyone else at the moment. Does anyone else see anyone else?
We don't know if they might be any of those unidentified numbers.
Right. And I understand Gary Wilson's unable to attend. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So how should we start this off, Nina?
I'll be glad to just quickly do initial introductions as to who we have on the call and then turn it over to our finance director, who will likely turn it over to our auditors. So we have Cheryl Herrick-Stella, our finance director, on the call. I know that Steve Venuti is also on the call, our town treasurer. And we have in one of the boxes on our screen, we have Alina Korsick and Scott McIntyre from Melanson Heath, who are representing Melanson Heath as our auditing firm for fiscal 2019. Cheryl?
And I will turn it over to Melanson and Heath.
I didn't know if you had any initial comments, so sorry to take away all the thunder.
Nope.
Well, thank you, Nina and Cheryl and the board. I'm Alina and this is Scott, and we're gonna go over your audit results for fiscal year 2019. We're gonna make a very brief presentation. Instead of 90-page document going through, we're just gonna do a small PowerPoint presentation. I can share it with you.
Perfect.
And actually, we have it, if you'd like to control it, you can certainly share it. We also have it in our presentation slides, however you'd like to go through it.
Oh, actually, then you go ahead. That's
great.
Easier. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we'll start with the next slide, and the next slide after the cover page talks about relationships that we have with you. We work with management to perform the financial statement audit. We express an opinion on your financial statements that are responsibility of management. We do report to those charged with governance, the Board of Selectmen, and we're gonna go over some of the reports we issue, which also includes the governance letter, which has that required communication. On the following page, and here we are with the reports to be issued, it's an opinion on your financial statements. However, we do not express an opinion on required supplementary information. We actually in a previous slide, and that required supplementary information is the management discussion and analysis, the pension and OPEB schedules, and we do issue a management letter and a governance letter, as I mentioned, that is just required standard communication to those charged with governance, basically saying that we did not have any disagreements with management, we did not have any uncorrected material misstatements to the financial statements, and it has some other form of required communication. I do want to say that we do not audit the Littleton Light Department or the Water District, so as it relates to those audits, you'll see if you follow in a financial statement document that our opinion is relying on their work. We had considerable communication with them, but we do not express an opinion on those departments. Then we're going into the management letter. And I just want to make a point up front that this is a fiscal year 2019 audit results, which means July 1st, 2018 through June 30, 2019. So our responsibility is to bring communication of issues that were present during that time period. And we also have 3 types of comments in the management letter: material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, or other recommendations. In your case, there are no significant deficiencies, but we have 1 material weakness and 3 other recommendations. And material weakness is a little more significant than a significant deficiency, meaning that the definition of that is that there is a deficiency in internal control or combination of deficiencies in internal control, where certain material misstatements to the financial statements may not be prevented or detected and corrected on a timely basis. And here we have the comment number 1 to address findings in assessment report. And you have already gone through that report that was done in the fall. And I think you've discussed your corrective action with the Board of Selectmen. We're just basically commenting on a few bulletins of that in your official management letter that you got, which is more pages than just this one slide. But some of the issues we also came across, there were obstacles when we were doing preliminary field work, and we do transactional testing on a sample basis only, but we noted that all the journal entries we selected for testing did not have supporting documentation, and a few circumvented transactions did not as well. And this management letter comment goes on to say, recommend segregation of duties, basically segregating between payroll and HR, and also limiting multiple super user accesses in the system for payroll. And as the town comment implies to this finding and the other 3 recommendation is that a lot of corrective action has already taken place. There's already a requirement in an electronic workflow for journal entries from vendor transactions, and and already the super user accesses have been more limited. The only thing is the segregation of payroll and HR departments. You guys will consider that for your fiscal year 2021 budget. The second comment has to do with ensuring proper allocation of expenditures, and this is just an other recommendation. So it didn't. Those 3 don't rise to the level of significant deficiency and material weakness, and that's only, we are noting that here is because we happen to notice some revolving funds that had either a significant surplus or the revenues for the fiscal year exceeded expenditures significantly. And we were just recommending that they can continue to be monitored or reviewed if there's, for example, an old surplus that got brought in that didn't really have a matching principle established in old years. And the comment does say there by the town that you guys are continuing to review them, and you compare that against your future cash projections and determine about the appropriate things that are continue to review the fees as necessary. Number 3 is just to evaluate the Parks and Recreation Enterprise Fund. Currently, the town operates it as a revolving fund, which is a special. The way it's operated is kind of like a revolving fund, a special revenue fund, but the way the town is reporting it is as an enterprise fund. An enterprise fund is a self-supporting fund. It's also an accrual basis, not modified accrual basis. So in the past years that we've seen, it doesn't appear like the funds are self-supporting. In 2019, I think the subsidy was about $200,000 from general fund, but yet the fund is reporting a net pension liability, which means that this fund is the one that's going to be liquidating it in a long term, like future years. So just to have the town continue to review the fund and see if the account structure reporting change is warranted, and that's what the town response is to review it and see if any change is needed. And the last other recommendation is just to strengthen the current policy over P cards. There's a bunch of bulletin items in the management letter itself, and you can go back and read that. So we're just basically trying to recommend that it is strengthened to include a little more guidance and training, and we also recommend periodic internal audits over this program, and that's what the town wants to do, strengthen their policy and continue to do ongoing training and monitoring of the program. And on the next slide, here is just a brief overview of how your financial statements are read. They start with auditor's opinion and be issued an unmodified opinion. Management discussion analysis is basically management providing a basic understanding of how the town is doing to their readers. And then it's followed by dual perspective financial statements. Government-wide is on a long-term perspective. The fund financial statements for governmental funds portion of that is on a short-term perspective. And it's followed by notes to the financial statements and required supplementary information. And then following slide, it's talking about the audit process. So on the next slide, we basically saying that the audit involves performing procedures to obtain audit evidence about the amounts and disclosures in the financial statements. And then we also want to say that we do not express any opinion on the effectiveness of the town's internal controls. However, we do get an understanding and document of what the controls are that are present, and we test transactions on a sample basis. And the following slide you can read later. It's basically rule setting agencies. For example, your financial statements are following GASB, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. And we can skip over the rest of it to go to the next slide, which I think is the slide you want to see the most, because most readers turn to general fund and look to see what the unassigned fund balance is in general fund. So if you do look at the financial statements, the general fund balance sheet is on page 19. And then in management discussion analysis on page 11 is where you see a write-up on the unassigned fund balance. So at June 30, 2019, unassigned fund balance was $10,991,702, and this is how it's broken down. Operating of 8.7 million and about 2.3 million of the general stabilization, which you keep in a separate general ledger of fund. And then at June 30, 2018, for comparison, unassigned fund balance was 8,857,244. And this is how it was broken out between operating and general stabilization. 6.8 million approximately in operating and about 2.1 million in general stabilization. And then the following slide is talking about what unassigned fund balance is as a percentage of total revenues. Now, the way that calculation comes about is also explained on that page 11 of management discussion and analysis. Now, when we see 22.4% at June 30, 2019, that basically signals that you have a sound balance sheet. And it's one of the areas that reflects your high rating, because credit rating agencies look at the unassigned fund balance this way. So at June 30, 2018, for comparison, it was 18.4%, grew 4% to 22.4 at 6/30/19. On the following slide, we have the budget versus actual comparison for general fund. So the revenues and other financing sources, excluding the use of free cash, exceeded budget by $1.7 million. And then expenditures and other financing uses also have a positive variance, because if you look at the actual amount, it's 55 million comparing to the budget is 57 million. So really you have unspent appropriations of $2.1 million. So it's a positive variance. And if you follow in this on the financial statements, it's on page 81, and it's in a lot more detail there, but basically here it's summarized. We purposely put the use of free cash of $4.6 million separate here, because if you look at the net results of negative 835,000, you might think it may be a little negative, but the results are actually really good. The 835,000 is because of the use of free cash of 4.7 thousand, and then, which means it's using your existing resources. And on the next slide, where we detail out the use of free cash, this is where you see a positive theme that the use of free cash is not used to supplement operations. The use of free cash is really using to build up your stabilization accounts. For example, you see capital stabilization fund built up by 2.6 million, debt exclusion stabilization fund 233,000, and the general stabilization by 568,000. And you also supplementing your capital projects. This is the 1.2 million where you're not gonna need borrowing for, because you're using free cash for those capital projects. Now, these types of actions are also consistent with AAA highly rated communities, and this is what your reader likes to see, that you're making these positive actions for the community. And the following slide is basically welcoming any questions that you may have on the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alina. So I will defer this maybe back to Cheryl. I don't know if you want to start off the conversation, or if we want to defer to FinCom.
Sure. I mean, what I'll just want to say is to supplement what Alina had already mentioned, and that is a number of the items that were brought up in the management comments were from FY19. And we've already done significant changes to the department to address them. So, this is a historical look back. And so I just want to remind everyone of that there have been a lot of changes to address those concerns. The Melanson and Heath did a very thorough job of the audit. They spent a lot of time with us. It was probably one of the most intensive audit cycles I've ever been involved in. And I just want to commend them and thank them for all their work, as well as all the staff in the finance office, because it did take up quite a bit of time, but I think it was really helpful for myself and for all of us to see. And as Alina mentioned as well, too, the financial statements really highlight the good financial position that the town's in right now.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Cheryl. I don't know, Betsy, did you have anything that you wanted to comment on?
Not really. I just want to make sure that, and maybe it's relevant or not, that the comments were made about the way we use free cash and so on. And we do have financial policies, and I don't know if our auditors know that or not, but I mean that's what all this is based on. Mm-hmm. And we follow them, and that's what's gotten us to AAA, and that's what keeps us there. So it doesn't just happen. I mean, we've done a lot of thought and work over the years to build this up and to get things in place. So that's how we're operating.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Betsy. Any other members of FinCom have any comments they'd like to make? No, Tom? No. Board of Selectmen, do you have any comments or questions regarding the report?
My comment is, I was listening intently to hear any fire alarms, didn't hear them, given the fact that this is Melanson and he's first year doing the audit for us, and especially given recent history, this is a real critical audit. I'm happy to hear from Cheryl that it was as thorough as she says it was, and I think it's just important that we, even if the news is good news based on our position and our practices, not to get too comfortable, because we've learned that that's where danger comes in.
True. Chase, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Just one quick question in terms of the findings, things that we may need to address. Did I understand it correctly that the only real open items at this point are addressing the segregation of payroll and HR functions and sort of how we're handling the Parks and Rec revolving fund?
Yeah, so the segregation of duties, correct. And then, the Parks and Rec and the revolving funds are really more so just to monitor and make sure that, we're keeping an eye on them and that the revenues and expenditures against them are appropriate, which we are. The other outstanding item is to enhance our current credit card policy. So that has not been done yet.
Oh, that hasn't been done yet. Okay.
We have a credit card policy in place, but there's some strengthening to that policy that they recommended, which we have not done yet.
And what's the process for implementing the strengthening of that policy if we were to choose to do so?
I would assume it would probably be it would be a draft that I would circulate to the Board of Selectmen and, likely maybe Finance Committee as well too, for their thoughts, comments, and feedback, and then eventual adoption once I met all of your needs and feedback.
Great. Thanks, Cheryl. And maybe Betsy, this is another question for you as the Vice Chair of FinCom. Are there any plans to review comprehensively the financial policies for the town?
We're supposed to do it every year. I don't think it happened last year, and I know there have been discussions about it. Of course, now everything will be kind of on hold while we get out of this thing.
Right.
But yeah, it should happen again. I know we have had discussions, but I don't think there's anything definite yet planned.
Okay. Thanks.
But good to ask for it and good to keep asking for it because that needs to happen.
Any other questions or comments? Steve, do you have anything to add?
I'm good over here.
All right, great. Perfect. So I think, Nina, we are
complete with that item. Yep.
Yep. So item B.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
It's all yours. You
No,
got it.
that's fine. So item B, 1, 2.
I'll defer to Cheryl on that one as well.
Thank you, Nina. So on the heels of all that great news, as far as where the town is today, and to Betsy's point, with careful and hard work over many years, this is one of the reasons why I have a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen to implement a spending freeze for FY20. Just in light of the uncertainty with COVID-19 and how it's going to affect our finances for FY20, my recommendation is to implement a freeze on all non-essentials, such as office supplies, discretionary expenses, etc. At this time, spending for salaries and wages, COVID-related expenses, contractual costs such as bond payments, benefit payments, etc., would be allowable, but all other spending would be frozen if the board so chooses to take my recommendation. There are a number of other communities that have already implemented a spending freeze at this time. I do think it would be prudent of us to do this so that we can try and preserve our bottom line as we end FY20. We will continue to monitor expenses and revenue just to make sure that we're hitting our revenue targets. But that being said, I don't think we can be too careful today. And so it's something that I'd like to recommend that the board consider.
Perfect, Cheryl. Thank you so much. And so we do have a motion before us. Any comments from the board regarding Cheryl's proposal?
Cheryl, can you give us some idea what is the impact on the dearth of the room tax and the restaurant tax and meals tax now for the next, in these 4 months, whatever it's going to be, probably. I don't know what percentage of the budget that is.
Right. So I actually ran that right before this meeting. So we've actually already collected 96% of our budgeted local receipts to date.
Okay.
So on the local receipt side, we budget very conservatively, which is a good thing, and these are the reasons why. And so at this point, I don't have concerns about not meeting our local receipt budget.
Okay. But next year we'll have to look, depending on how things play out, right? That and
I think it would be
cars and all those kind of things that happen when the economy takes a hit, right?
Yeah, I think it would be wise for the elected officials to consider reevaluating FY21.
Okay, thank you.
Quick question for you, Cheryl. In terms of the discretionary, how much does that roughly? I don't need a rigorous calculation. Are we talking 2% of the budget, 10% of the budget?
It's probably 7 to 10% of the budget. Okay. And I mean, in truth, a lot of this probably has already halted, but I think it's important for us to put it out there as a policy. Mm-hmm. And so that if there is no question about what people should be spending money on. And again, every little dollar really helps at this point.
Oh, yeah. And even if you only said 1 or 2%, I wouldn't object to it. I was just curious what we could expect the budgetary impact to potentially be.
Yeah, I'd say probably about 7 to 10%.
Very good. Thank you.
Paul, do you have any comments?
It's unfortunate, with the economy down, you want to do your part to inject money into it, but it's the prudent thing to do.
Great. Tom, do you have anything to add?
Looks like you might be on mute on your side, Tom. Or we don't have audio coming through. Does anybody else have audio on, Tom?
No.
Can't hear him.
No.
Yeah, the other thing I would say on this is, that you're doing kind of the right thing also in terms of keeping people on staff and so on. And that's, of course, for our benefit as well as for theirs. But
looks like Tom's got some IT help there.
Can you? No? All right, we'll go to Joe Knox. Joe, do you have anything to add while we're waiting for Tom to?
I'm all set.
You're all set? Okay. Is there anyone else who wanted to comment? I don't know if Greg Champney's still on or.
Yeah, he's there.
Left.
Yeah, I'm still on. Chase kind of asked the same question that I was thinking of asking, so I think I'm good.
Okay, great. Did we get nothing with Tom?
Tom, do you want to
thumbs down? What do you think, Tom?
Chat box?
Oh, yeah.
Perhaps in the chat box, if you'd like to type it in. While he's typing, I would say on this subject, and Cheryl kind of touched on it a moment ago with regard to FY21, perhaps one of our next meetings jointly with the Finance Committee should be a discussion on FY21 and next steps.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
We do Super Saturday all over again? No, not funny.
Oh, man.
I was trying.
That went really well, I thought.
It was incredibly well done. So
Yeah,
well done that
it
we just
was.
want to do it again.
Right?
it's a nice thought we'd actually get together in person, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, right.
Oh, I know. Virtual Super Saturday.
That'd be a long day.
I know.
Tom, this better be good. We're all waiting for you.
I know. He's still typing. No pressure.
Maybe while Tom is typing, I'll advance the motion, Cindy. I mean, we don't have to end the discussion, but then we can get that out of the way.
That's a good idea.
Okay. Then I'll move that the town implement a spending freeze on all non-essential expenses, i.e. office supplies, discretionary expenses, conferences, etc., and authorize exceptions as determined necessary by the town administrator and finance and budget director.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, roll call vote. Chase?
Before you call the vote, just want to address Tom's question.
Oh, sure.
He said the freeze, I think he's confirming that the freeze only impacts non-essential spending and doesn't impact employee salaries.
Correct.
And generally speaking, that's an accurate statement. There are certainly, programs that could have been programs that we would have had in the spring, but they're no longer going to be in the spring. So those minor details may impact employee salaries. But Cheryl, I don't know if you want to clarify any of that or if I got it right on the head.
Yeah, no, I for the most part, it shouldn't be impacting anyone's, to Nina's point, if there's certain programming that we're not doing through the spring or otherwise, then there might be, certain seasonal or hourly employees that, we might not be hiring at this moment because we don't have the programs to support them.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. So we have a motion made and seconded. Any further discussion or comments? Okay, all those in favor, roll call vote. Chase?
Aye.
Paul? Joe? No?
Aye.
I don't think Chuck's still on. Is he? Nope.
I think Chuck went to attend the Zoom Board of Health meeting in Groton.
Oh, okay, perfect. All right, great. So I am in favor, aye. So the motion is approved. We are on to Steve Venuti, Town Treasurer, review of House 4586 regarding tax collections.
So we've been following this bill since the governor first proposed it. And he finally signed it on Friday after going back and forth between the House and Senate with some certain changes. There are 3 local options that are in front of the selectmen for tonight that are in the bill and need to be decided upon. The first one has to do with the fourth quarter tax payments. The due date of those tax payments is May 1st. The bill is allowing the town to extend that due date to June 1st with no interest or penalties to the taxpayer. One of the things that we've been seeing and encouraging taxpayers to do since the bills went out a couple of weeks ago is to pay online. Taxpayers have been doing that. We've been receiving fourth quarter tax payments already. And we would encourage anyone who is able to still to pay their bill by the due date of May 1st. But I think our recommendation is for the selectmen to allow the June 1st due date on this piece of the legislation. The second option that's out there is to basically allow the town to waive payment of interest and any penalties in the event of any late penalty, like payment on excise, tax, betterment assessments, or other charges added to a tax bill, all the way to June 30th. So this is essentially pushing the due date of the fourth quarter tax bills to June 30th instead of the July 1st, with June 1st, which is in the first local option. This piece of the legislation opens up a lot more can of worms. It's a nice thought process, but it operationally and cash flow wise with the town, it could present a little issue. Basically letting the taxpayer pay all the way to June 30th. We have payments, very substantial payments due on July 1st. Our pension assessment around $2.8 million is due July 1st. So we need the cash flow. And that's all this is talking about right here is cash flow for the town. Is to get that money in as hard as it may be, by June 1st. So we would ask the selectmen not to accept that local option. The third local option extends the due date for exemptions and deferral applications from April 1st, the current date, to June 1st. We've checked with the Board of Assessors, we've checked with the head assessor, and they have no issue with accepting this local option. It's actually good for the taxpayer and the people who couldn't get in here on time. So we would ask the selectmen to accept that local option.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. We'll open it up for questions now. We'll start with the Finance Committee. Are there any questions or comments? Greg?
Yeah, hey, Steve, does this mean that going into Q1 next year, that can is going to be kicked down the road as well? Or are we going to almost be looking at doubling up on payments for taxes for some of the residents?
The first quarter tax bills will probably be going out the very last week of June. So
Not much overlap.
who knows what's going to happen moving forward, whether this is going to push to the next quarter or not, but people will have their first quarter tax bills very soon after they, the due date for this one.
But then the due date, Steve, would be August 1st, correct? For the first
The
quarter.
due date is August 1st, yes.
Yeah, my thought process is there, if we're letting them pay at the end of June, then they got a month to pay their next tax bill. Are they going to be able to make that? Or are they going to need an extension on that as well, if they need it?
Again, that's up to the legislature to put something in place in case this pushes down the road a little further. But right now, we're just talking about the fourth quarter tax bill.
Okay. Thanks, Steve.
Yep.
Hey, Steve, what percentage do we know of the tax bills get paid by individuals versus by the banks through their mortgages and things like that?
It's a little less than half, Betsy. We probably see around 3.2 million come in, and there should be no delay in those funds. But what I'm going to have to do, again, from a cash flow standpoint, is put that money aside so I know I have it for the retirement payment.
Mm-hmm.
Scrape together the funds that we're going to need for the rest of the payroll that we're going to be paying and expenses.
Okay, well, you would expect those to come in on time, though. There wouldn't be any change in that, though, right? There's no reason that would happen.
There shouldn't be any, because those funds are already held by the escrow agents.
Right.
So there should be nothing that delays those funds from coming in.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Good question. Tom, well,
I was actually just going to text Tom the information for calling in. Tom, would you like that information if you wanted to call in? If you nod your head, I'll say, I'm going to accept that as a yes.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, Board of Selectmen, Chase, do you have any comments or questions?
No, but Betsy asked the question I thought was most important.
Okay, Paul?
Steve's explanation and advice is fine with me.
Great. Joe?
All set here.
Great. Okay.
My fingers are not going fast enough.
So do we want to move forward with the motion while we're waiting for Tom's comment, or how do you want to proceed?
Oh, of course, I sent it to the Tom's landline, so that didn't work. Tom, I've got to get your cell phone number in the future. I'm going to type it in the chat box.
Judy, could we see the form of the motion up just so that Steve can take a look at it and verify that that's the appropriate language?
Okay, so we have three options that Steve had mentioned.
Second one, we're suggesting that you do not move forward with.
Right. So we have option 1 and option 3. You are recommending that we proceed with it.
Correct.
To confirm. Okay.
Looks like Tom called in and he's got a line, but we've got him on mute. So we're just trying to figure out what number Tom called in on. This is the guessing game. Good luck, Joe. If you get this right, just unmute both of them for now.
I just messaged him to ask. So he just told me, so I'm just finding the number. There we go. There we go.
There we go.
Oh, yay. Hi, Tom.
Hi, everyone.
So did you have any questions or comments regarding Steve's presentation?
No, other than, so 3.2 million is what you're expecting to come in through escrow?
Yep.
For fourth quarter taxes?
Yes.
And you said that's about half?
That's a little less than half, yeah.
Okay.
And we've already received some payments in, so people have been paying once they receive the bill. And if I can just say, we encourage people to pay online. Please don't put any cash in the lockbox out front.
That was do not, just for the record, do not put cash.
Please do not. And if anyone's paying by check, with us being short-staffed here at Town Hall, it's going to take a little bit longer to process those payments, whereas we can do the online payments that very day. And it's a lot easier for the people during this time if we can just encourage people to do it online. We've added instructions on the website on how to process payments online. It goes step by step. The tax collector's office put that up last week. So please try and do it online if you can.
Steve. Are those checks made out to you?
What's that?
I want to know if the checks are made out to Steve.
Okay, so we have two motions. We have a motion before us. We have three motions before us, but only two are recommended by Steve. So is there any further discussion or questions from the board about how to proceed with these motions?
You ready for it?
Yep.
Then I'll move that the board extend the date of the fourth quarter tax bill from May 1st to June 1st, 2020, and move that the board extend the due date of exemptions, which include deferral applications, to a date no later than June 1st.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, Chase?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Chuck?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Cindy? Aye. Okay, perfect. So the motion is approved. Thank you very much, Steve, for that information and guidance. We appreciate it. So we are on
Cindy,
to...
Cindy, do we need to take a vote on this?
Oh.
It's a question for Nina. Does the FinCom need to vote on this article?
We do not. Nope.
No? Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks for asking.
So we're on to our next agenda item is to discuss the annual town meeting and annual town election. You want to start off with this, Nina?
Yes, I'd be glad to. As the board knows, one of the last discussions we had about town meeting was to modify the town meeting date from our regularly scheduled May 4th meeting date to June 1st. And as we look at the calendar, as we look at various different details relating to this pandemic, a number of different questions come to our mind. The first is, will the current May 4th order by the governor be extended? Can we protect the residents who may come to town meeting, sufficiently by June 1st? Jokes aside, maybe we're talking about an outdoor town meeting. I don't know what that would look like, but those are the types of things we've begun on our periphery to start to think about. How will budgets be affected with a possible reduction in town revenues? Of course, we've just talked a moment ago about reviewing what we're planning to propose for the FY21 budget, and we need to take those discussions and actually begin them, which presumably we would have at our next meeting. And then also, which articles will we need to move forward, and which may be altered or removed from the warrant, especially if we're in a type of situation where we're trying to minimize the amount of time spent at town meeting because, let's say, the COVID-19 issue is still ongoing. Of course, the governor's order did exempt the legislature, so meetings of the Littleton open town meeting form of government is permitted regardless of this pandemic. And so it doesn't follow the same constraints as the governor has ordered of no more than 10 people gathering. Technically, we could have more than 10 people gathering at a town meeting. And in some ways, when we get to that item, we may have to have that situation with the town election, but we have a little bit more flexibility with town meeting. The town meeting can actually be moved beyond June 30th, but as outlined in the board's packet in the memo, it's not ideal to move past June 30th for a number of reasons. So we're hoping at this point in time to have the town meeting in June and looking for the board's support to change the initially changed date from June 1st to June 15th. That would allow us a little bit more time to continue doing some of this planning, get us outside of the window and have some more certainty as far as what things will look like beyond May 4th and whether or not there will be extensions to the orders, or if as a state or as a nation we're doing better with this pandemic and we're on the decline in the pandemic. Also in the packet for the board is a draft town meeting timeline, which outlines the deadlines that would be implemented if the board did vote to move to June 15th. I'll pause there and answer any questions of the board or clarify anything if necessary.
Does the board have any questions or comments?
Do we have to set this date up now?
I would recommend it. The difficulty we would have if we don't set the date is the fact that we have a number of reports and a number of deliverables and timelines and milestones that need to be adhered to if we don't. I don't know if this is the route you're going, Mr. Chairman, but there's entirely a possibility that we're going to have to revise it again. And certainly don't want to be in that position, but it would be important for the purposes of giving other departments concrete deadlines, specifically with regard to finalizing the warrant and deadlines to submit citizens petitions and the like, and also, of course, making sure that we meet the bylaws as far as the town meeting report and getting that printed in a timely fashion. We have to notify a lot of logistical parties to make certain dates happen.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from the board?
This has got to be something that's kicking around MMA and a whole bunch of other bodies. Do we have any sense of what the, I don't know if best practices is the right term, but do we have any sense of what the best practices might be? Or are we all just making it up together at the same time?
I would tell you that we're all making it up together at the same time, because the MMA does, as you guessed, have a compilation of what other cities and towns are doing across the Commonwealth on this very issue, both town meeting and town elections. They have a spreadsheet that is published on their website with a snapshot, a static database that basically says as of a certain date what each community had reported last. Unfortunately, each reporting community doesn't identify the date in which they reported. So it could have been several weeks ago when a community reported that they were going to maintain their May X date, and they haven't had an opportunity to modify it. But when you look down at that database, the bottom line is that there are a number of, it runs the gamut for all intents and purposes. I can tell you that I have preliminarily inquired with our town moderator and our town council, and should the board of selectmen be available and other major important stakeholders, town clerk and finance committee, and I'm sure I'm missing here someone very important or several important folks, but the town council and our moderator are able to make it. Currently, Carlisle, our moderator, as of course you all know, is the town administrator in Carlisle, is planning for June 22nd.
So Carlisle is planning for June 22nd.
They're not, I don't know if they're fully confirmed, but that's my understanding, yes.
Okay, so we're looking at the 15th. Okay.
And I see our town council, Chris Heap, on the line. I don't know if he turned on his camera intentionally to maybe add some input here, but
I heard the words town council. No, I don't have anything particular to add right now. Certainly want to keep working with everybody. And I think the comment that resonated was that everybody's trying to figure this out all at the same time, and all still working through it.
Chris, earlier today, I sent you an email asking you to look into a crystal ball. I'm going to ask you and Nina to do that again. Do we have any indication if the legislature is contemplating structural changes to town meeting that would change how we fundamentally do it?
you mean as far as like things like remote participation?
Yeah, that could mean a lot of things, but remote participation was at the top of it.
Mm. Chris, I haven't heard anything on remote participation for town meeting. Have you?
I have not yet. That's an awful lot of people.
I have no idea what kind of mess that would make.
Yeah,
but
that sounds tough. But we've got to figure out strategies to deal with it pretty quick. But I haven't heard that one yet.
Okay.
Admittedly, we haven't had these discussions internally because it's too early to tell, but I do see a scenario by which we vote to move it to a certain date, call that June 15th. And leading up to that date, we're uncertain if it would be prudent to plan an outdoor town meeting. And in that case, we would begin to strategize and discuss what those options would look like, come back to the board and present our options. We could delay and move it to a date later in June, or we could presumably move it to a time in July, which is permitted. There are certain details that fall into play when we make that transition, and a number of those are outlined in the memo in your packet. But I think the biggest challenge we have if we did move beyond June, and we can discuss this further at that time, is we might have some material impacts to capital budgets that we were planning for fiscal 21. That's where some of the constraints would come in. But for all purposes, as far as the operating funds are concerned, because we wouldn't have implemented a new fiscal 21 operating budget, I anticipate we'd be able to work with the Division of Local Services in the context and the structure that they've given cities and towns under the new legislation to be able to work through a month-by-month budget. But hopefully we don't have to get to that point, and hopefully we won't have to go beyond June 30th. But like I said, if we do have to move town meeting again, I think the conversation looks more like, here are our options to do the town meeting outdoors, or shall we move town meeting to after June 30th?
Okay, and I was just reading the memo too, Nina. It looks like the town clerk's recommending the date of the town election on June 20th.
Yes. Like I said earlier, and I know the town clerk's on the line, so Diane, jump in. Madam Clerk, when you would like, but I know that the legislation doesn't allow us to move the town election beyond June 30th, unlike town meeting.
Is Diane on?
She is
She
there.
was earlier.
I see her. She doesn't look muted.
Oh.
There's not video. Is she on the phone? I'm going to turn on this 2401, which actually that should be her.
Ah.
Okay, so I'm here. So,
Hi, Diane.
can you hear me?
Yes.
So, okay, so I don't have video. So, yeah, basically the legislation doesn't allow us to go beyond June 30. So, you know, usually our election is right after our town meeting. So that's why I suggested that we go the 20th. So I'd like to stay with the 20th, obviously. Going the 27th isn't going to really change anything. So I'd like to stay with the 20th. We have to go either the 20th or the 27th. So I'd like to stay with the 20th. We have to do early voting, not absentee voting. It's different but the same. It's just a different application. It's called 2020 Municipal Election Early Ballot Application. I will send that out and put it on our website, and people that are looking to early vote will be able to do that. If they're nervous about coming down to the location, they can early vote. It's something that we're going to be pushing and promoting, and you know, same exact thing as absentee voting. It's what we did for the March primary, but it's the same as absentee voting. It's just called early voting. It's going to look exactly the same as the absentee ballot, but it's just going to be in a different envelope. That's all. So, but we're going to stay with the 20th. We're going to all be down there. We're going to do, you know, everything to protect everyone, the people that are working at the polls, and anybody that's coming in. We're going to have a lot of precautions. So we can't do anything about moving it after the 30th of June because the legislation, Chapter 45 of the Acts of 2020 stated that we could move the municipal election to a date certain or on or before June 30th, and that's the latest date that we could go. So I'd like to stay with the June 20th.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Diane from the board?
The only comment I'm going to throw out there, Cindy, is with depending upon where we're at with the situation, we may need additional people. I know that Diane had said this previously when we talked about moving the election. We may need some folks to step up and volunteer to help with the election. A lot of the younger population is coming back from school. They're remote learning right now from home from college. So maybe they would be a population that could help us out and step in. Anybody that's maybe a political science major or something like that might be able to step in. So I think part of our outreach could be finding out from Diane what she would need as far as assistance, and then working with potentially that population, which seems to be a lower risk population during these times.
That would be excellent if we could get the younger population, because all of our volunteers, at this point in time are of the older generation, and they are at risk. So if we can get the younger folks to come out and help us out, that would be wonderful.
Madam Chair?
Certainly. Paul?
Yeah, I'm not advocating this, and I'm not even sure whether it would be permissible, but on Saturday, I just happened to participate in a Zoom meeting. It was a Reconstitution of the Democratic State Committee, and over 300 people had to be credentialed as voters. We did that all electronically, and then at various points, votes were taken, and it all kind of worked. So I don't even know if that option is possible for town meeting, but I do know, having just experienced, that it can actually be done. So I kind of like the idea, if the weather suits, to go stand outside, and that's on more than one occasion, 100 or so years ago, they did it that way.
Alumni Field.
That's right.
It is
Okay.
handicap accessible, and the seating is great out there, and we do have the elevator, so wouldn't be a bad idea.
That's a good point.
Restrooms.
Okay, any other comments or questions for Diane? So we have two recommendations. One is to set the date for town meeting at June 30th, and the other is to set the date for the town election at June 20th.
So I'll move that the board vote to adopt the town meeting timeline for the June 15th, 2020 annual town meeting, and set the date for the town election at June 20th, 2020.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor, Chase?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Chuck?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Diane.
Thanks, Diane.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are up to item number 6, Littleton Apothecary. I am going to turn this over to Chuck and Nina, and we have Chris Heap on the phone, on the video conference as well, to lead this off.
I'll tee us up, and then Chris, I think I'm going to leave it to you to kind of take it over. But we are at a point where Christine Ms. Nordhaus has made a number of. She's met many of our terms. We have one sticking point, which I think Chris is going to speak to, and I think we're at a point where the board can take action if the board is prepared to do so tonight.
Thank you. Chris?
Sure. So like Chuck said, we've been working on the HCA for a while now. You have a new draft in your packet. That new draft is produced by us, Chuck and Nina and myself. It contains a number of revisions, some of which are Littleton Apothecary agreed to changes that we requested. We agreed to a number of changes that they requested. So we've made some progress on a lot of different issues. I think it is in a somewhat unusual posture, though, because what the draft that we've shared with you for the packet tonight, on one of the biggest terms, we don't currently have any agreement with the applicant, and that is the issue of the community impact fee. So on that one, we have consistently requested throughout the entire negotiation that the applicant agreed to pay a 3% community impact fee to the town.
She has agreed.
That with some acknowledgement that there is some discretion on the town in terms of how that's spent. And I think those are the two main points there. The current position from the applicant until a couple days ago was that they would agree to pay a flat 3% of sales for the first 6 months of operation, after which there would be an accounting system put into place, and that would be monitored going forward, which is something that we haven't agreed to. So on the question of the community impact fee, that remains something on which we have not currently agreed to terms. And like I said, the other component of the community impact fee is that host community agreements in other towns commonly contain an acknowledgement that there's some discretion on the town's behalf in terms of how that money is spent. Other changes that we've made to the agreement that I don't think are currently in controversy, but I just want to make the board aware of them because they are slightly different than the other marijuana retail HCA that the board worked on a couple months ago. We've switched in the agreement from an annual payment of the community impact fee to a quarterly payment. The range of things that the town can spend money on out of the community impact fee has narrowed somewhat in response to some concerns expressed by the applicant. There was a broader ability under the other HCA to spend money on education and counseling services for other forms of substances. And there are a couple other areas in which that was narrowed somewhat compared to the last one that you looked at. It's been revised to say that after the expiration of 5 years, the town may renew the HCA rather than shall renew the HCA. The other HCA said that it shall be renewed. And we've had some back and forth on one of the important provisions in the HCA, which is the covenant not to sue. We've regularly asked that there be an agreement in place that the applicant won't sue the town, even if the law changes in some way. And she's requested some changes to account for a change in the law after the agreement goes into place. I think we've made progress on all those other issues that I just mentioned, but as I said at the beginning, we're still haven't agreed to language that we can both agree to on the community impact fee. So as Chuck said, I think we're at a point where we haven't really made progress on that in the last while in the discussion. So we thought it was time to bring the agreement back to the board, talk about it with you, and try to get some feedback.
Great, Chris. Thank you. Okay, any thoughts, questions, comments from the board?
I'm just going to add something, Cindy. Well, before we turn it over and open up to the rest of the members, Christine made a comment on the chat feature, so I wanted to address part of it. Christine came forward with a proposal, and part of her proposal was establishing a 501c3 that would in fact benefit, called the Littleton Project, that would in fact benefit Littleton projects. And it's a fantastic program, and I look forward to seeing it come to fruition. Although that we are aware of that, and we hope to see that come to fruition, that is not part of the HCA and doesn't factor into the HCA. So that's not part of, Christine's making a statement on the chat box that very generous proposal, but that is not part of the HCA agreement. Just don't want to get the two convoluted.
We made, and just to follow up on that, we made the, I think we made the, we figured early on in the process that because that was going to be a private organization, not involving the town, it was best to leave the town out of that. Certainly not prevent the applicant from going forward with it, but that's not an obligation that's between the applicant and the town, at least not in this agreement that you have in front of you.
Would we, engaging in this digression for a second, would we memorialize that in a development agreement similar to the way that we memorialized community care collectives agreements outside of the HCA? Or is the structure here different so it may not work to do it in a development agreement? Which I'm not sure is all that enforceable anyway, but that's a different thing.
I think the question
I think the fact that it's a 501c3 is a big component, Chris. Am I wrong in saying that? Whereas with Community Care Collective, that development agreement was not tied to an outside organization that would be making decisions on where the money would be spent.
That was an agreement between the town and another party. It's not, given what we've discussed, it's not clear what, if any, involvement the town would have in the operation of the Littleton project. So it's the applicant would be in charge. It would have a private board, and given that the town doesn't have any involvement as it's currently constructed, I don't know that I see the need to do it in a development agreement. I suppose it couldn't hurt to do it, but the real question there is, what are the obligations that the applicant is undertaking to the town, and what would the town's involvement be going forward?
So structurally different from Community Care Collective's agreement to transfer a certain amount of money to the town for whatever purposes we want to use it for.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments from the board regarding this?
Can we
Christine,
ask how this compares with the other agreement we had with the collective?
Sorry, can you say that again, Joe?
I'm just trying to see, is this a lot like the other one that was drawn up? I mean, are we on equal? Is there anything more stringent on this one than there is on the CCC one?
So it's very similar. We attempted to keep them as close to each other as humanly possible, but given that you're negotiating with two different parties, it's hard to do that. Absolutely, the differences between the two agreements. Well, this agreement is different from the last one in a couple of ways. Like I said, we're asking this applicant to pay the town the community impact fee on a quarterly basis, whereas Community Cares Collective was asked to pay, agreed to pay the community impact fee on an annual basis. As I understand it, the applicant is okay with that change. Like I said, the other important one is that in the first retail agreement, there was, in paragraph 1D, there was a long list of things that the town could spend the community impact fee on. That list was meant to be representative, not comprehensive. In other words, if something wasn't on that list, we could still spend money on it. But there was a long list of things that were specifically called out. That has been scaled back a little bit in this agreement. So I would say in that sense, the revisions to that section are less beneficial to the town than the last one. And the disagreement there is that the applicant objected, anything we spend money on needs to be reasonably related to the operation of this facility. And the applicant, in this case, thought there were some things that we had included the last time around that didn't qualify as reasonably related to the operation of her facility. So that's, I think, a good example of a section that is perhaps less beneficial to the town than the last one, but one on which we actually worked and gave a little bit of ground on that one.
Chris, can I ask a question on that real quick? Yeah. My understanding is that one of the things that Littleton Apothecary is asking for is accounting of expenses related to the marijuana retail establishments.
Yes.
Does the definition of reasonably related include those accounting expenses?
Yes.
Okay.
The other difference there's language in the prior agreement that the two parties shall renew their agreement after 5 years, last for 5 years, and then it absolutely will be renewed. Given that we still haven't come to terms on every last thing in this agreement, I switched shall to may in this agreement. So if there are concessions we're making that we're not entirely comfortable with, but we nonetheless enter into the agreement anyway, this will give us an ability to sort of reevaluate things before we are required to renew the HCA 5 years down the road. And lastly, the covenant not to sue, which is the agreement by the applicant that they won't, after entering into this agreement, turn around and sue the town down the road. That was just plain in the last agreement, we will not sue you, period. This one, I was just working today actually on some language to allow for the possibility in the agreement that a change in the law might affect the terms of this agreement. So the covenant not to sue, which is important, is been revised slightly to say that if the law changes 3 years down the road and that law change is effective to old HCAs, in other words, they're not grandfathered, there may be some ability to get some relief there, which I would sort of qualify as another concession from us in an attempt to work on this. But those are, I think, the major differences. Other than that, those are the major differences.
Thank you.
Sure.
Madam Chair?
Certainly. So thank you. Christine, would you like to say anything?
I would, thanks. Yeah, so I got that draft to look at today from Chris Heap. And I took a look at it. The things that I objected to in the definition of the reasonably related were two things: the town giving grants to the Littleton Coalition on Addiction and suicide prevention. Those were the two things that I said didn't seem to be reasonably related to the operation of my shop in town. But I certainly agreed to educating the public, to schools, after school programs. I agreed to all of that. And then at 4:45 this afternoon, I talked to Chris about that covenant not to sue, and he proposed language that I just agreed with. I agreed with the language as he proposed it, so I feel like that's fine. I'm not asking for a discount. I want to pay this fee. I'm only asking that the town account for it transparently. The people have a right to know. And that's been the only real issue that I have had from day one. I want to pay it. I want to pay it. I want to pay it. I want to give the town a chance to set up accounting. I'm happy to pay an outside contractor to do that, so it doesn't have it doesn't tax the sort of humans at work for the town. I do not want to burden the town, and I want to pay this fee. And I'm willing to pay for all of the accounting. So I'm sure that I'm being defensive after all of these months, but this narrative about me sort of nitpicking and being a challenge or asking for some special treatment is so false. I want to pay this fee. I want to do it right. I want the town to transparently account for it. And I'm not looking to quibble about what's reasonably related, although suicide prevention isn't reasonably related to like road impacts or traffic from my shop. So that's it. I'm just asking for transparency and accountability.
Having written or been sort of the genesis of this expansive set of examples of reasonably related, part of the reason that I included the Coalition on Addiction is that I do see that as something potentially reasonably related, notwithstanding the.
We'll put a dollar figure on it, but not just say the town can give grants to the Coalition on Addiction. I mean, if you want to give a grant to the Coalition on Addiction, like, is it going to be $650 billion or is it going to be 25,000? I just feel like the town giving grants with money that's supposed to be an impact reasonably related to my shop and pay for like police details. I'm willing to sort of deal with that, but it just can't be such an open-ended thing. And I don't think, and you know, a contract is supposed to protect both parties. That doesn't protect this party. If you can give grants with money that's supposed to be paying the town's expenses, it's not income, it's to cover your expenses.
I would say, though, that our biggest concern, the board's biggest concern most broadly going into these, is the externalization of costs. And that's particularly why I included the Coalition on Addiction. So I'm receptive to the argument that it could be defined as an amount. I could work with that. But I don't think it should be stripped out wholesale.
I think that Chris's point was that it wasn't prescriptive that these are the areas that the funds would be spent. It was just a description that these are some of the possible areas where it could be spent.
And I think, just to follow up on that in response to Christine's comment, I think we've been motivated throughout this negotiation primarily by an attempt to just capture what all of the other towns have done who have done this before us. And it is a absolutely common feature in just about all of the other retail HCAs that I've seen executed already in other towns, that an applicant agree to fund it at 3% and to acknowledge that there is discretion on the town in terms of how this money is spent. I will say that throughout this negotiation, one of the challenges has been that it seems as though the applicant is looking to exercise a greater degree of oversight after the payment of the 3% fee than we typically see in other agreements in other towns. Right? So that's the general comment on sort of.
And my response to that is not oversight. It's not oversight. I'm not asking for oversight. I don't care. I want I want the town to account for the expenditures. I don't want to, it's not about my oversight. It's about the oversight of the population of Littleton, the people of Littleton. And no other pot shop has offered to be a nonprofit pot shop. So other towns may have agreed to stuff, but they didn't have something like this standing right in front of them. But whatever. I don't know what to say. I'm not looking for oversight. I'm not looking for a bargain.
Madam Chair?
I'm sorry. I was just actually reading through the application from Littleton Apothecary, just to refresh my memory on a few things. So Chris, if you could just reconvey again, just summarize where we are with this application and this agreement. What we're not agreeing on.
That's it. Just what was just discussed.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I mean, can I just ask Chuck and the other folks who participated on behalf of the town, is that a recommendation? Because I think we owe it to the applicant, ourselves, the rest of the town to vote on something tonight and move forward. And if I'd like to see, and I've stated this before, is this agreement look as much as possible like the one for CCC, but we embarked on separate paths on that, so that kind of has a life of its own. But to the extent possible, the closer it resembles that, the more comfortable I am, and I hope we're in a position to act on something right now.
Okay.
And what I'd say to that is the board can vote to adopt this HCA that you have in front of you as the one that it's willing to move forward with. What it can't do, what we don't have right now is I think an applicant on the other side who is willing to sign the agreement that you have in front of you. So we don't have an agreement, but the board could certainly endorse the current draft in its current form.
And Chris, when you say current draft, I want to make sure, I know this has been in flux even today, so I want to make sure I'm looking at the version.
Draft that's in the packet is the draft that existed as of Friday.
Okay.
Is that the one that you're referring to, Chris?
Yes. Yeah. No. What I meant to refer to was the one that was distributed in the packet for Friday.
So today doesn't count.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
What?
The work that we did today wouldn't count. We made changes to that draft today.
Yeah. So I spoke late afternoon with Christine in an attempt to work through one of the comments that she shared back with me. So that includes language that the board has not actually seen, because we came to terms on that language. Well, between the two of us, we came to terms on that language late afternoon. And what that did was simply say in the agreement where she won't sue us, say that if she says she won't sue us, but if there's a change of law that applies to existing HCAs, that directly changes something that we've agreed to, then she can seek judicial relief over that. So I don't know if that's something the board is interested in or wants.
Well, could we just simply add that language or change, the existing language to incorporate that? Chuck, is that something you're comfortable with?
Seems reasonable.
Which paragraph is that, Chris? 14. Okay.
Do you want me to read the language that I came up with?
Sure.
I would appreciate that, Chris. Thank you.
Sure. And in fact, I don't know if I can share it on my, if I can share it. I don't know if that's helpful.
Joe would probably, do you have to give him permission to share it?
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Can you maybe email it over to Joe and he can just share it? Is that quicker?
You bet.
I don't know if this is even an issue, but you have permission, Chris, you can share.
Oh. Now I have to figure out how to do that.
So much
power.
I figured it wasn't going to work.
I gave you an out. You said to email it.
Okay.
Other than that language that you and Christine worked on,
okay, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay.
That's paragraph 14.
No. That's not.
That's the impact.
Yeah, that's the impact fee.
Oh, sorry, I shared the wrong document. Okay. No, I can't do that.
I'll just read it to us, Chris.
Okay.
I just put it in chat.
Joe.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that.
I just did it for you.
Okay.
And this is language that Chris proposed to you, Christine, and Christine, you're okay with it?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
And
was there anything else that the two of you came to agreement on?
that was it.
Okay.
Can I add one more comment though?
Sure.
Under paragraph 1D, I didn't catch this before we transmitted the last draft, but in the word discretion used to appear in the first sentence of paragraph 1D. Just an acknowledgement in that sentence that the town has discretion in how this money is spent. I think that's an important add back in. So first sentence, and I don't have the precise drafting there, but it would be just some acknowledgement in the first sentence of paragraph 1D that there's discretion on the town's part.
Okay.
Other than that this with those two revisions,
After the word payments.
What's that?
After the word payments, to use discretion to offset.
I said the town shall use the above reference payments in its discretion, in its.
Okay, to offset. Okay.
Yeah, in its discretion. That's all I got.
Did that come up this afternoon, or that's just something you're?
No, that's something I caught, and I apologize for that. But it's just it got taken out at one point, and I just would be more comfortable if there's some express acknowledgement that the town has some discretion here. Still has to spend the money to offset its costs, but there is discretion in how that is done.
Okay.
Okay, so with those edits, my understanding is then that the substantive disagreement is in section 1E. Is that, which is essentially the documentation of the community impact fee. we've been dancing around a lot of other things, and they may be significant to some degree, but 1E is that's where the real argument is.
Yeah, and I've understood there to be some disagreement about whether or not after a certain period of time, the applicant is paying a flat 3% on a regular basis, or is paying that for a shorter amount of time, and after which kicks in a detailed accounting that is provided for in the agreement going forward after that.
So instead of the 3%,
in other words, this draft is silent on what the town's obligation as to any obligation on the town's part to in terms of any process of documenting its costs. The town can certainly do that, but the agreement does not specifically set out any procedure for that having to be done on any kind of particular timetable. The applicant's preferred language, which you don't have in front of you, I think would set out a process by which that has to occur.
After a set period of time?
Yes. And that set period of time, in as recently as a couple of days ago, was 6 months. This in a conversation we had this afternoon, the applicant agreed to increase that to a year. So it would be a flat 3% for a year, after which there would be, as spelled out in the agreement, some process for creating a detailed accounting, after which it would be, that would go into place.
Years 2 to 5.
Years 2 to 5.
So in the applicant's argument, we get a 1-year grace period, and then from there on out, we can spend their money to do the accounting to prove our expenses for the community impact.
That's fair.
Okay.
Christine, you just added that?
Just, what do you mean just? I don't know.
No, on the on the chat.
Yeah, I stuck my proposed language in the chat.
Oh, this is your proposed language with respect. Okay.
Is this the language you talked with Chris about today, or is
No, I sent this language to Chris back in February. He just responded to it today.
Okay. So at this time, we're looking at this agreement, Chris, correct? To see if we as a board agree to the way it's written at this time.
Yep.
Okay.
My sense is I can live with a certain amount of a grace period and then accounting. I would want to see that definition of reasonably related expanded back out a little bit so that it maximally captures all of the externalized costs of a marijuana retail establishment. I think if we went that direction, it would also be wise for us to make sure, I didn't see in the community impact fee piece, it would be wise for us to make sure that the accounting is specifically noted in there in terms of reasonably related. Maybe it is, Chris, you said it was, I just didn't see it.
I can find that.
But I think that's a digression we don't need to worry about.
Okay.
There is some language in there somewhere that says, or other, there's like an open end to it. It says something like, or other expenses deemed reasonably related. So I certainly never viewed that paragraph as like a set in stone, these are the only things. I thought that there was built-in flexibility, which I'm very comfortable with.
But there is a gap between what Chase had sought to have inserted in this agreement. And
yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's absolutely true.
And I'm okay with the idea of bounding the idea of grants to a certain dollar amount. That That smells fine to me.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments from the board? I'm just trying to follow these changes. Is Chuck still on? Or did we lose him?
Cindy, you got me?
I do now, yeah.
All right. Sorry, I just had my 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 laptop just died, so I'm on my phone.
Okay.
I think I've got it tracked, Cindy, what we've discussed in
Okay.
agreeing to or not agreeing to in our version.
Okay. Okay, so you've kept track of all of that, Chris?
As I understand it, I shared that we had talked about revising the covenant not to sue, and in a way that I think is more protective of the applicant, but I think is ultimately fair. And adding back in a reference to the town having discretion in the first sentence of 1D. Those are the only ones that I think we've, by consensus, found
have agreed upon.
Yeah.
So we have the community impact fee of 3% in paragraph 1A. And the definition of gross sales is fine, but it's the accounting for that community impact fee is where we're not agreeing. Correct?
That's a term that we have not agreed to. Yes.
Okay. But the board as a whole, is it acceptable to the way this agreement is drafted before us, correct?
I prefer the drafting of 1E in the packet that we have, which is essentially without the accounting constraints. That is my preference. I could get my head around a version of 1E that had a certain grace period for us where we collect the full 3% without question and accounting thereafter.
Okay.
My reaction's pretty much the same as Chase's.
Okay, Chuck, any comments?
I'm happy to be moving forward.
Okay. Joe?
Yeah, all set with what the revision that Chase talked about.
Okay. So we have a revision we're all set with the covenant not to sue language. We have one revision with the addition of the language, the discretionary language in 1D, and then the language that we're going to incorporate into 1E, correct?
As long as we're all agreeing that, yeah, I can make that change. I just want to, we're making, the last one is to insert a grace period where the 3% is paid without supporting documentation, after which we will implement an accounting structure called for in the agreement.
You guys just made history.
I can live with that.
Okay.
Wait till we vote, Christine.
Okay, so are we ready for a motion?
What would the form of the motion take to approve the HCA with Littleton Apothecary as amended and subject to drafting by council?
I would say subject to revision by town council to capture the changes discussed, just discussed.
Okay. Then I'll move that the Littleton Board of Selectmen enter into a host community agreement with Littleton Apothecary, subject based on the version in our packet dated 4/6/2020, subject to revision by town council as just discussed.
Do we have a motion? Second?
Second.
Perfect.
Second.
All right, great. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Chase?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Chuck?
Aye.
And Cindy is aye. Perfect. Great.
Great work, you guys. That's negotiating. Bye.
Finally. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Cindy, I got to step away for just 1 second. Sorry.
Sure.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Thank you.
A lot of time, Nina. Thank you.
I didn't do quite nearly as much as you and Chris did, but thank you for.
Thanks, Chuck, for taking this on. It's a lot of work. Appreciate it.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Chris. Thank you.
Good night.
All righty. Where are we? We are. Okay. Item number 7, proposed amendments to section SR 8(1) VB of the earth removal regulations.
I would defer to our assistant town administrator who's been working more closely on this subject.
Thanks, Nina and Cindy. So what is in front of the board, and this was working with Chris Heap, town council, is a proposed amendment to the earth removal regulations, specifically within section 8-1 VB, which has to do with the scheduling of a hearing with the board following receipt of an application. The existing language, and I'm just gonna put it on the screen right now, or at least the proposed changes. See where that went. Okay. So in the public notice, which was posted on the main bulletin board as well as on the town's website last week, is making these proposed changes in underline as well as strike through. The underline is inserted words and characters, and the strike through is letters and words to be removed. The net effect is that the previous language established that the board scheduled a hearing no less than 30 days and no more than 45 days. So that leaves a small 15-day window to act on an application. Working with town council Chris Heap, we're proposing to strike the language that then identifies not less than 30 days, so that basically it reads that we shall set a date on a application which shall not be not more than 45 days after receiving the application. That allows us to handle applications that come in a more timely basis than waiting for that small 15-day window, and be more responsive to not only applicants but also neighborhood concerns regarding applications for soil removal.
Okay, great. Are there any questions or comments from the board on this item? No. It seems pretty straightforward to me. All right, great. We do have a motion prepared on this. There's no further comments or questions.
You want me to take that, Cindy?
Yeah, Chase is muted. Oh,
Sorry.
there he is. It's all right.
I'll move that the board vote to amend section SR 8-1.V-B of the earth removal regulations as proposed.
Second.
Okay, great. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further comments? Roll call vote. Chase?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Chuck?
Aye.
And Cindy is aye. Okay, perfect. So the motion is approved.
Cindy,
Yes.
I have to sign out and sign back in again because I can't see anything.
Okay. And while Joe is doing that, we are going on to item number 8, 9 Air Road, discussion of soil removal activities. And I am going to turn this over, I believe, to Joe Layton again.
Correct. So just to give you a brief overview, and we do have the property owners for 9 Air Road in attendance with this Zoom meeting. The Board of Selectmen Town Administrator's Office did receive an application from the fields for soil removal at 9 Air Road. This application is at the result of action undertaken by the building department for a stop work order and recommendation that an application be filed. I was working over the last week and a half with the fields to finalize the application so that the Board of Selectmen can, at this evening's meeting, schedule that hearing date. So that is one of the action items that we will have to undertake tonight, is to schedule that date of the hearing for one of our upcoming meetings. And talking, and I was just looking to see if Chair is back on. I see him there. I don't know if he's in video yet. At one of our previous meetings, I had identified that wanted to be able to have the applicants just give an overview of what's going on, if they desired, and just want to at least just remind everyone, because there may be some butters also that are in the Zoom meeting, that with the scheduling of the public hearing, there may be some discussions pertaining to the technical aspects of the application that we would want to defer for the public hearing.
Okay.
We're not going to make
It was my hope that we could hear from the applicant so we could get as much information out there right now out to the public. So hopefully when we have the hearing, it'll go a lot smoother and a lot quicker.
Okay, great. And the applicants, I believe, are on the call.
I had unmuted both Michael as well as Matt. I see Michael is muted, and Matthew is unmuted.
Joe, you might want to unmute Jennifer Platt too, their attorney.
According to, yeah, I believe she is unmuted.
There you go.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us on tonight. I appreciate that, and we've been all doing a lot of Zoom meetings lately, so glad to see you. Happy to give a little bit of a background, if I might. Just starting point, I'm Jennifer Platt at Anderson Krieger, representing Field Development. Matthew Field and Janet Field are here. Michael and Sheila may be here as well. I'm not sure who's behind all the numbers. But to give you just a bit of background, we're talking about a property on 9 Air Road. It's about 5 1/4 acres. It was approved for a 3-lot A&R plan by the planning board last September. The intent was to build 3 homes, 1 home on each lot. These are all conforming lots. They have adequate frontage, adequate lot size. Again, 1 house per lot. The field obtained permits to relocate an existing barn on the property and to demo the existing home so they could move forward with the construction. The project plans were approved by Conservation. They were approved by Mass DEP. Conservation inspected and approved the erosion controls that are on site. Field Development was doing work under these 2 permits. The barn, which they were relocating to the back of one of the lots so a house could be built in front of it, unfortunately was not sound and collapsed when they were trying to move it. Since they were no longer working under the demolition permit, the building inspector issued a cease and desist order on March 23rd. The Fields then applied for a building permit for a house, which would have been the next step, which again, it's conforming, it's as of right construction. There's no relief that's being requested. There's no relief that's required. The developer was told that the building inspector could not issue the building permit until they come in front of the Board of Selectmen for an earth removal permit. As you know, under the town soil removal bylaw, earth removal from a site is allowed in connection with construction of a building on the site, which is how it's done across town. There have been, as you know, over the last couple of decades, hundreds of projects approved in town. There has not been, to my understanding, what the town clerk has told us, not a single earth permit removal required for any of these projects. And these include very large projects, including the Point, which had in excess of 700,000 cubic yards of earth removed from the project. What we're talking about here is simply earth removal that's required for foundation, for septic, for drainage, and most importantly for grading, to make sure that the driveways for the properties are going to be in compliance with state building code, which limits the grade that you can have from a public highway up to 10%. So a certain amount of earth needs to be removed. I will say that no topsoil is being removed from the project. It's all being retained on site. It's going to be used at the end of the project to stabilize the property. It's going to have, at least in accordance with bylaws, 4 inches of topsoil put back on. It's all going to be seeded with natural grass mix. So there's going to be no disturbed area left at the end of the project. Our real concern is that we have a pending building permit application, which we'd like to have approved. As every other project in town, if there's an active building permit, you don't need an additional earth removal permit to be able to do the work that we need to do on site. So our ask would be is to remove that cease and desist and allow the building inspector to move forward and issue the building permit that has been applied for, so that construction can go forward as it would with any other project that you would have in town. Happy to answer more questions, but that's the basic overview. And we're at a stop point. It's a critical point to be able to move forward, and we're being held up, whereas any other project wouldn't.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm actually going to call upon the building inspector, who's on the call as well, Mr. Mullen. If he could just respond and give us a little history from his side on this, it would be helpful.
Ed, we still have you on mute, unfortunately.
Wait 1 sec.
You got to start all over again after Joe allows you in. That's why it's important to be nice to Joe.
Can you hear me now?
Can.
Okay. So I just started to say that I would agree with everything Jennifer has stated so far. I want to make sure everybody can hear me clearly. I was told last time I mumbled, so I just want to make sure I'm clear. As far as the point is concerned, in any other projects that have happened in town where significant soil has been removed, they all had special permits issued by the planning board to do the construction, and then went and applied for the building permit. Here, where they only have a 3-lot subdivision, no special permits required, but a building permit for incidental work, again, just like Jennifer stated, would be for foundation, septic system, drainage, driveway, construction. If you look at the plan that they submitted to conservation, which they got their approval for erosion control and that they show a significant cut. With that significant cut, in conversation with our town attorney and our ATA, it was my determination that it wasn't incidental, and it was therefore needed to go to the select board for a soil removal permit. Now, regardless of what history has occurred in town prior to this, I would state that this is the proper way. And in stating that, the soil removal permit, it's a mechanism to make sure that the soil that is being excavated off site, one, is for the public benefit, and two, it stays here in town. And I believe the applicant has the right to apply, and I believe the applicant, in my opinion, should receive approval due to the fact that those things are occurring, and it is for the public good, and the fill and soil is being used for public projects and projects occurring here in town. So.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ed. Appreciate that. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
When this first started, I was concerned. I didn't know what permits had been pulled. In the meantime, I've had a chance to check on those permits. And I know that the cease and desist did put a damper on some good companies that were working there. I'm pretty satisfied as long as the neighbors are satisfied with what's going on, or I might want to hear what their concerns are. I did take a ride up there, and it seems like it's a pretty clean operation. So at this point, I don't have a problem with us moving forward.
Paul?
Yeah, initially when this was agended, I guess I interpreted that this was going to be the hearing, and I just feel bad that the folks that were whose work has been stopped have to wait further. But obviously we need to hear from people that if there's any issues that aren't being addressed. I appreciate and support the building commissioner's recommendation that we issue it. If we can't do it tonight, I just hope we are able to do it at the next meeting.
Okay, great. Chase, did you have any comments?
Yeah, my only comment goes to Ed's comment regarding the public benefit element of it. I would be interested in making sure that, and I think we've got Nick on the line too, that the water department has an opportunity to take a look at this. I don't know if that means conditioning the permit on their approval or their review, but I want to make sure that this amount of cut doesn't negatively impact our ability to implement the sewer discharge area. And my understanding is the water department and the applicants have been in discussion on this point. So I don't think we necessarily need to get in the middle of that as long as they're able to find a resolution on it. But I would like to see that memorialized in some way.
Okay.
And sorry, can you give me a little more information on that? Being that, I mean, this is a standalone 3-unit development. There is no, all the drainage is being handled on site. I'm not quite sure what off-site impacts you're concerned about.
Madam Chair, would it be okay if we ask Nick to
certainly
give us their thoughts on that, if you're okay with that, Nick?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I think what Chase is referring to is the letter that was sent in.
For the record, could Nick identify himself? Not everybody may know who that scruffy looking fella is and what service he does for the town.
Yeah, General Manager Light and Water, and now Sewer. So what Chase is referring to is the sewer aspect of it. 9 Air Road directly abuts the town's proposed discharge site. And I've been working closely with Michael on this. He gave us the proposed elevations of the project. We had CDM Smith, our engineers, evaluate those proposed elevations to make sure there's no negative impact to the proposed discharge site, which it appears there's not any. So our chairman wrote a letter to Chairman Knox specifying 2 issues. That was one of them. As far as I'm concerned, I think we're good there. I don't think that's an issue anymore. And the second issue was getting an easement alongside of Air Road for sewer main or any utilities that we can get outside the state right away. And that got sent to the Board of Selectmen as well with the proposed easement. So those were our two issues. And again, the first one that Chase referenced has been vetted out, and it's no longer a concern of ours.
Okay, so you're comfortable with that particular piece being put to bed?
I am, yep.
Okay.
Okay, great. And oh, I'm sorry, Jennifer, did you want to say something?
Yeah, if you could, I mean, we were under the understanding that the earth removal permit would be discussed tonight, or heard tonight, I should say, if it were needed. Again, under the sort of past history of the town, it hasn't been required. And again, we've got a construction project that is underway. We've got a building permit, which should be issued, and it's being held up. There is, as you may know, some of this earth or materials that are being taken off are being used for town projects, so they're going to be held up as well while we're stalled here. I mean, it is important, if there's any way to be able to get approval to either remove the stop work order this evening. That would be a critical for us to be able to continue work.
Okay, that's something we can discuss, but go ahead, Ed.
Madam Chair, if I may, if possible, I'd be happy to review the building permit applications for the lots that are on site and, issue a stop work order. I mean, remove the stop work order and issue the building permits if it was the pleasure of the board and we saw a way forward where they were going to continue with the application to get the soil removal permit so that we weren't impacting public welfare or public projects due to the stop work order.
Okay, thank you.
In other words, do I understand this right, Ed, that you see a path forward here potentially where we don't necessarily issue the soil removal permit, but we don't have to hold up the building permits either?
I think the soil removal permit is necessary. It's a bylaw that needs to be addressed more frequently, I believe, in the town. And that being said, in reviewing our town code and our permits, but trying to go along with past practices as well. If it's the pleasure of the board, like I said, I'm happy to review the applications and, if possible, issue the building permits, which would allow them to remove a certain amount of soils for septic, drainage, driveways. And then in turn, they still continued the path forward for their soil removal permit.
So in 2 weeks, we formally take up the soil removal permit.
Yes, and tomorrow at 7 a.m. I could start the review on the building permit applications and possibly have it issued out in a few days.
So, board, this is Joe. Just a question because, granted, it's for discussion later on the agenda for meetings. Currently, the board is scheduled for meetings on the 13th, and then again on the 21st, and then the 27th. For later on is our discussion about what is our meeting schedule going to be in May and 13th and for April and May. One of the reasons why we had to amend the regulations to give us more flexibility is for instances where time to act on an application is a little bit more pressing than just waiting essentially a month to a month and a half to take consideration of an application. So with 7 abutters, it would be feasible to send out abutters notices for this for the 13th. It would be tight. 21st, which is then 2 weeks and a day out, would also be another opportunity for us to schedule such a public hearing to act on an application.
And if I could, of course, I would request that we be in as early as possible. I think this is really, it's quite limited. You have complete drawings in front of the board already, which have been already vetted by conservation in terms of any impacts there. So hopefully with the limited number of abutters and the work that has already been done to get this site approved, that we could move very quickly. And again, what's being done here is incidental and in connection with proposed building on site.
Okay, I was just wondering too, do we know if there's any abutters on this call?
I believe we have one. If any of the butters can just could identify themselves in the chat, just so I can make sure that I'm selecting the correct people. I believe.
Well, can I suggest something? I understand that we have the abutters, but the fact that we haven't sent out the public notices related to it,
yes,
means that we could hear comments from abutters, but this isn't the hearing.
Correct.
Right.
And I think we should encourage them to express their opinions to us, probably in writing, but in the interest of expediting the meeting, it may make sense to ask for those in writing or during the actual hearing.
Okay.
Well, can we set that hearing for the 13th?
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds reasonable to me.
The only caveat that I would make on the 13th, and I think, the 13th works as good as any, is currently we don't have a number of different things programmed onto the 13th. That was originally scheduled, obviously, when we were planning on having a May 4th town meeting. But I'm fairly certain we can utilize that date for other work that we are trying to advance if the board does choose the 13th. I just don't know how brief the schedule will be. The things I'm envisioning are things like potential budget discussion, of course, COVID matters, and potentially warrant. So I think that there's good work that we can progress on that date if you do select the 13th.
Okay.
We select the 13th as the date for the hearing, but if a building inspector gives the okay with the permits, can they start up the gravel removal if it's has to do with the actual construction of the houses?
I think if I may, I don't know which chair to talk to right now. You're both on the screen. I think we empower the building commissioner to do just that. And as long as I think the terms he used were public benefit and the soil was used in town, I think as long as those terms are met, then he can allow for them to do soil removal kind of under his discretion and his advice. And it's called, I believe, incidental. So if it is for driveways and for septic and things that Ed had mentioned when he was commenting, I in the interest of keeping this thing moving forward, with those caveats, I'd be okay.
Yeah, me as well. We maintain the integrity of the process, and yet we apply a little common sense and refer to our building commissioner to use his judgment.
Okay. All right, so the board is in consensus with that. Do we need a motion on this, Nina, or? Yeah.
Just for the scheduling of the hearing.
Yeah, just schedule a hearing.
Okay. You got that, Chase?
I'm on mute.
Somebody else has got it. Go for it.
The only thing we'll put it up. I'm sure Judy will pull it up here, but I would recommend a time other than 8 p.m. since it's an off-cycle week. I would suggest 7 p.m. in the event that.
Move that the Board of Selectmen schedule the public hearing to consider the application for soil removal at 9 Air Road for April 13th.
13th.
Is that the date?
Yes.
2020 at 7 p.m.
Yes, via Zoom, if I could add that to your motion.
Via Zoom or other online service in case they get burnt out from all the Zoom meetings.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, roll call vote. We'll start with Chase.
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Chuck?
Aye.
Cindy? Aye. Okay, perfect. So we will schedule that soil removal hearing for April 13th at 7 p.m. as noted in the motion. Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
So the next agenda item is the EHS Director screening process.
So through you, Madam Acting Chair, contained in the packet is the memorandum of agreement between the Board of Selectmen and the Council on Aging going back a number of years. There are some different details that outline the steps to be taken for a screening process as agreed upon back then. And the only other item I'll point out is that in speaking with our outgoing EHS Director, Liz Trediak, I recall her distinctly telling me before at some point in the past that it was a 4-interview process, 4 different interviews. And it's not necessarily unreasonable for a position like that, but I think the difficulty with a 4-interview process with especially government, I hate to say it, is it drags it out with timeline. So I don't necessarily have a solution specifically, but I think as we discuss this and the board discusses how they'd like to approach this screening process, I'd ask that you consider in the back of your mind ways in which we can reduce the amount of time in the screening process so that we don't lose candidates, because those types of things happen in terms of individuals looking for positions. If they get picked up somewhere else and the market is, really good for EHS directors. In fact, as the board knows, the Mass Municipal Association launched a campaign about local government work because local government wasn't seeing a number of applicants in a number of different fields. And we have reason to believe that finding an Elder and Human Services Director is not going to be particularly easy. So I just wanted to put that thought in the back of your mind. I think if we could get it down to 3 interviews, that's certainly ideal, so that we can cut down on the time between the interviews and thereby cutting down on the full process.
Right.
But that's the only specific point I wanted to make.
Right. So I have no thought process on why it was a 4-interview process back when we hired Liz. I don't know if any other members of the board have any comment on that.
I'll recall.
The only thing I didn't ask these questions, but the only thing I could think of is if there was a scenario again, I didn't have an opportunity. Anne, I'd call on Anne. Perhaps Anne would be able to tell us.
Oh, Anne's on the line.
Speculating.
Can I blame Anthony? He's not on, right?
No.
Supposed to say you can always blame the people that are gone, but exactly. I don't feel right about it.
I'll blame you.
Okay, that works.
Maybe Anne can give us some insight.
Yeah, I can tell you that we did have 1 extra round of interviews in that process with Liz, and that was because the search committee was torn between 2 candidates, and they really couldn't decide, and they requested bringing them both back in to make the final decision. So there was 1 extra one.
So can you kind of outline what the steps were versus me trying to guess what they might have been, since I haven't had an opportunity to ask you?
The screening committee got together. They, did the normal review of all the resumes, brought it down. As I recall, it was about maybe 4 or 6 candidates they interviewed. 1 or 2 dropped out along the way, scared off by the idea that we might have a building in our future. And then there was 2 very strong candidates, Liz and another candidate, and no one could really come down on which one. And so that was the reason that they requested they both come back in again, back to back, because the original interviews were over several nights that were spaced apart. And so we brought them in back to back so they could really compare one to the other. And then after that, the candidate has to go to the Council on Aging, the full board, for an interview there.
But it's two candidates that have to go to, the way it's, the MOA is written is that the search committee finds at least two finalists. So I wondered, was there something different that happened there?
Yes, after we brought them in back to back, the other candidate withdrew. So we did end up with one, and the Council on Aging at that point voted to accept the one after they had met.
Okay. And then presumably after that would be the ratification or confirmation of appointment through the Board of Selectmen, would have been the 4th.
Yes, at the meeting. It's not a full-fledged interview per se, but yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But I do agree with your comments, Nina. Any way we can, tighten the time frame is always better.
Okay. So one thing I know under the way it's, I don't know what the proper terminology is, but this position is a joint hire. It's a joint decision by the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator, if I do recall correctly.
This is basically that. The town administrator makes the appointment, the Board of Selectmen confirms it.
Okay.
And it's also subject to confirmation by the Council on Aging. So technically, just to kind of go step by step with what's in the MOU, the way that it's worded is it says the town administrator shall convene a search committee. And this is where it gets a little ambiguous because we no longer have an assistant town administrator for finance and budget, and comprised of that individual and 3 members of the COA to conduct a paper screening of applicants. The search committee may conduct an initial screening in executive session and so on and so forth. And then the search committee shall select 2 finalists who shall be interviewed at a posted public meeting of the full COA for its recommendation to the town administrator. The town administrator's appointment of the director of Elder and Human Services shall be subject to the approval of the Council on Aging and the Board of Selectmen, of course, subject to successful completion of background checks, query, etc. That's what the current MOA states.
Okay. Any comments from the board?
No, it's just that we move on this as quickly as possible.
Okay. My only comment was going to be about the ATA and Director of Budget of Finance language in the MOU. Where is that again, Nina?
It's the item 3 in the MOU, and it's actually, if you look at the control sheet, it's detailed right on the front of the control sheet.
Oh, okay.
So you don't have to sift right through the details.
Yeah,
I do think we should provide some clarification to whether or not there's, I mean, technically we have an assistant town administrator, we have a director of finance and budget.
Right.
You know,
so
it really doesn't make a difference to me. They're both stellar employees. So.
Right. Well, I think I don't know if we want to dive into this now, but when that position got divided up, so to speak, between finance and administration, and I'm just going to use Bonnie and then Anthony as examples of that. Mm-hmm. So you really, I guess, have to look at where that language appears to make the differentiation between, is it going to be the town administrator we have in place right now, or is it going to be our director of budget and finance? Until we go through all of our policies and correct documents like this MOU. But unless the board has some other interpretation or wants to correct me on that, that's my understanding about how that position was divided up, so to speak, a few years ago. That was actually before I was on the board. So, I mean, in my opinion, it would make sense that it would be the assistant town administrator and not necessarily the the Director of Budget and Finance in this situation, but
Right.
I don't know if anyone else on the board has a comment about that.
Yeah.
I think that's what the intention was.
Right.
Yeah.
Point
Okay.
being, the assistant town administrator for finance and budget was likely selected because that person was the assistant town administrator.
Right.
Okay, so how does the board want to move forward on this? We need to get going on this.
Quickly.
Yeah. So the job, it's been posted, correct, Ann?
Correct.
Okay,
Posted and advertised.
okay,
Can I nominate someone tonight?
sure.
That fast enough?
Yeah.
And you're going to be finishing up your job, right?
Not for the position.
Okay. So what do we need to do on this, Nina?
At this point, unless the board is seeking to make changes, which would certainly
Follow the process.
recommend be
Yeah.
conducted, considered with the Council on Aging, nothing.
Okay,
There's really
great.
no action to be taken. All that we need to do is, Anne, could you tell us what the closing date of the applications are?
April 24th.
So as of between now and April 24th, Joe or I would work with the Council on Aging Board for them to identify the individuals in which they wish to participate in the screening process, and we would work with the HR office to develop the process, the same way we always do, go through the applications without names and refrain from reviewing information and simply doing some level of blind review over the applicants so that we can select an applicant and a pool of applicants to interview.
Okay,
We need to appoint a member of the Board of Selectmen, right?
The current MOU is not written in that way. If the Board of Selectmen wanted to appoint an individual, I don't see an issue with that, but I'd probably suggest it be discussed with the Council on Aging Board first.
I thought Chase was part of this initially, and I thought.
Oh, that was a facilities role.
That's right.
Okay, all right. Have we received any applications, Ann?
One.
Oh, good.
Just one.
Okay.
That's the front runner.
Yeah, right. With that, this is more a statement than a question, but I think we need to think about doing some active outreach to generate applications, given that a lot of EHS departments are probably being pulled in 1,000 directions right now. And if you and Joe don't have enough to do, Nina, and if you're not putting out any more fires, that might be another thing to keep in the back of your mind is how do we generate the applicants for this position?
I've reached out to a couple of EHS directors that I know and have asked them. We did put it on the Mass Council of Aging site there, so it will get out there. But I was hoping maybe, find a more personal route to find the right person.
Sure.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Ann.
You're welcome.
Post
All
a
right,
notice
wonderful.
on the door of the Market Basket and the package stores.
Always thinking, Paul.
We can put it in the toilet paper aisle. Everybody will go there.
Or the flower aisle. You can't get flour.
Oh, man. Okay, so we're on to item number 10, Town Administrator.
Thank you. So we touched on it a little bit earlier. It sounds like we're definitely having our April 13th meeting. The other meeting that we had scheduled, which was not necessarily a regular week, would have been our April 27th meeting. At this point, I would say let's hold off in making any decisions. Considering everything that's going on with COVID-19, it may be prudent to have that meeting up until we don't need that meeting, the 27th, that is. So unless the board feels differently, I would suggest we just keep every Monday this month, with exception of the 21st, which is a Tuesday because of the Monday holiday, on our meeting calendar and move forward.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Hey, Nina, Judy just posted something in the, does everyone realize the meeting on the 21st is a Tuesday?
I think Nina just addressed that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That was intended to be a joint meeting with the FinCom, right? Can they meet? And they meet on Tuesdays.
Yeah, well, the other option is if we can mobilize quickly enough, we might have our first joint meeting on Monday the 13th. But we may have our second joint meeting on the 21st too.
Well, I wasn't advocating the 21st. I just was remembering that I think we scheduled on that date because it coincided with the FinCom.
Okay, okay. So if the board's comfortable with keeping the April schedule the way it is, then I would also turn your attention to the May schedule. The only difference with the May schedule at this point in time would be that as opposed to having May 4th be the town meeting date, we would have May 4th be a regular Board of Selectmen's meeting date. And that would coincide with the timeline that we've prepared for the annual town meeting revised date of June 15th. And I'm trying to, I don't think the 18th is a observed holiday. So we would be meeting on the 4th and the 18th in May. So theoretically, we wouldn't actually need to take any votes to change our meeting schedule because we're already scheduled to have all those meetings, but wanted to certainly have that conversation to make sure we were on the same page. Okay.
I think it's fine. Looks good.
Awesome. I defer the rest of the items to Joe and others on the board. Joe Layden, sorry.
Okay, so this next item is for me, it's a little bit of a history lesson because had to look back and try to look through the files and to learn about Nagog Hill Orchard. So we in the office had been contacted, as well as the building department had been contacted in order to schedule inspections of the bunkhouse for Nagog Orchard. In looking through the paperwork, it appears that the board had granted an extension in 2017 to January 2019 to allow for work to continue on a request for proposals and bid specifications. It looks like the work was done along with the Ag Committee, and I think there was a Working Farms Committee as well. But I could find no record that the RFP was ever published and no bid specifications were pulled together. Because we are now essentially approaching the growing season for the orchard, one of the questions I had was whether or not the board would want to do an extension and then allow us to reconvene the effort for the RFP and the bid specs. I think there was maybe 2 members that were working on this, and I saw references.
At one point, at least, Chase and I were, and a lot of work was done. So, I mean, Chase will remember this as well, that somewhere documents exist that we had a pretty detailed proposal in the works, timeline, all the rest of it. And if, Anthony had it in his computer, if it's no longer existent there, council was involved as well, and it may well be somewhere down at Meary's and Harrington, but
yeah, I found a red line draft,
okay,
but not a finalized draft. So, and that's where, at least if it almost made it to the finish line, then at least that's promising that maybe we just have to bring it over that finish line and then get things all set.
I think we deliberately didn't cross the finish line with it because we got very close, but then we wanted to collect some data for the RFP based on production quantities. Essentially, an RFP that just says, here's a piece of land and there's some apple trees is less valuable.
Put some accountabilities in there as well, right?
Right, and we wanted, part of the reason we extended the 1-year lease was so that we could collect that data to put in the RFP, and then in the turnover of staff and all of that, frankly, we probably dropped the ball on the opportunity to do that. So what we should do is extend that lease 1 more year, collect that data, and then complete the RFP.
Okay.
Okay.
But Joe, you need to prod us, I think, a little more frequently. Not don't want to suggest you or anyone else administratively has done anything wrong, but we're going to need prodding in order to get the ball rolling on that again. Of course,
yeah.
Chase has got one eye on the door, so I don't know.
Yeah, but the door keeps running away from me.
Moving the uprights.
Yeah.
No, that's understood, especially because if we're extending it a year, we'll need to make sure that we line up any metrics that are needed, any measurables that we need to ensure that we can track, so that come harvest time in the fall, we're prepared to integrate that and turn it around pretty quickly.
Joe, I found some emails too from Keith Bergman and Jamie and Will that I'll send to you as well regarding this lease. And Paul and Chase were included in that as well. So in the event that you don't have them, it might fill in some gaps for you.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, so we have a motion, we're in agreement.
So then I'll move that the board vote to extend the lease that expired January 15, 2019 for the Nagog Hill Orchard to January 15th, 2021.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Joe?
Aye.
Chase?
Aye.
Chuck?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
And Cindy's aye. Okay, wonderful. Motion is approved as written, and we are on to the next item.
Spec pond.
So 64 Spectacle Pond, before the board, or rather at our last meeting, Chase had written a number of conditions that the board discussed and voted to integrate into a earth removal permit. That email was forwarded to Chris Heap, and he and I worked on a draft decision. We had essentially nailed things down middle of next week, and then coronavirus and COVID-19 all of a sudden happened and made a very busy end of the week. So my apologies for sending out essentially that draft this morning. I did then finalize it by adding the exhibits and sent that out in the afternoon. I had highlighted within that decision 3 items, and they were 2 of them were dates, and 1 was just some added language within condition 3. But everything else essentially tracked Chase's email with recommendations for a approval of the permit. So the dates had to do with when the applicant provided the board with stamped calculations. I put that as the 22nd. And then basically that the calculations demonstrated that the runoff do not demonstrate that post-construction runoff is consistent with or less than pre-modification, meaning that if the runoff going off the site prior to the modification was actually less, that wasn't problematic. We just didn't want to have it as more. And that revised plans and stamped calculations would be due the end of the month.
Okay.
So and the only other thing is that the final as-built would be 90 days from the date of this permit. So 3 months from today would be when the as-built plans would need to be provided.
And then if they don't, we get to go hire someone at their expense to go do it.
Correct.
Okay, any questions or comments from the board? No. Okay.
Thank
I can't, I don't.
Sorry, yeah, I'm trying to find it. Here we go.
Yeah.
I got it.
Great.
I'll move that the board vote to approve the soil removal permit for 64 Spec Pond Road as amended.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Joe?
Aye.
Chase?
Aye.
Chuck?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Cindy's aye. Okay, great. The motion is approved as written. And we're on to the next item regarding the temple.
So in the packet, the board has a copy of the final signed version that was sent to the Board of Health for Groton. Also, the Board of Selectmen were copied. Our Board of Health was copied, as well as our Board of Health Director. So last week, I had forwarded the Zoom meeting invite to the Groton Board of Health meeting. That was, I believe, scheduled at 7:45 tonight.
7:15.
7:15. Thanks.
You're welcome.
So, and in that email, they had acknowledged receipt of this. And we had a little bit of discussion as far as whether or not someone would volunteer to listen on in.
You looking at me, Joe?
I'm looking at you.
I did. I did listen in, and they heard Mr. Gentili and Mr. Arena. Gino and Louise were on the call as well. I said our piece, and I just basically said, as good neighbors, what would they do if these two addresses happen to be in Groton? Would they act differently? And just asked that they respect the letter from us. And there was a solution provided by the temple to Mr. Arena and Mr. Gentili, and I just asked that they take that into consideration when they make their motion. They had planned on continuing the hearing in order to get some testimony from an engineer, an engineer that was other than someone from the temple, essentially, not the engineer that did the design. And they obviously didn't make any decisions yet. They're continuing it to, I think it's 2 weeks out. I jumped off before I got that information. I actually received a text from Mr. Gentili. I think he said it's in 2 weeks. So no resolution as of yet. They're very appreciative that we gave them their support. We had 2 members from our Board of Health there, and we had, I represented the Board of Selectmen. It was a well-run meeting. They let everybody kind of say their piece, and hopefully we can help get some resolution as we've done with the town of Ayer. We've had some good communication with them. We've done some neighborly goodwill, and hopefully there'll be some goodwill here.
Okay.
Was the property owner, the property in Groton, present?
Yes, there were 2 individuals. There was one person who seemed like he was certainly the man in charge, and
Okay.
The Catholic Church, it's the pastor. Not sure exactly what the high priest or what I'm not very familiar with the Hindu religion, but and there was somebody that seemed like he was almost like the property manager or kind of in charge of operations. And they were very respectful. It was a well-run meeting, and everybody's looking for a resolution. They don't want to spend the money. They found a solution. They said, yes, we can fix this, but it's going to cost $10,000. They don't want to spend the $10,000, so that's why they're pushing back now. And Mr. Gentili and Mr. Arena said, you offered us the solution, and then kind of pulled it back off the table. So now this is the only course that we have. Ira, I don't know his last name, who represents the Neshoba Associated Boards, I believe. Is it?
Yeah.
He kind of spoke on behalf of the temple. He said, there's no real violation here. It's a noise violation. It's tough to determine whether or not it's really that noisy, and with a smell, it's not that difficult. So I actually brought up sanctuary. I said, with sanctuary, we have a similar situation with a cultivation site where they when they first opened, a lot of people were complaining about the smell, and they've done a lot of things to mitigate the smell by putting in filtration, as well as boosting the draft to get the exhaust further into the atmosphere. So I said there are things that are in place, and clearly you guys have already found a solution that would cost you $10,000. So I would recommend that you take a look at some of those other means for eliminating the noise and eliminating the olfactory nuisance. So,
and furthermore, if this comes up again, there are ways of quantifying the odor complaints as well. What was that facility in Air that had significant odor issues?
The soy place.
The soy place, yeah, and they were actually able to. I can't remember exactly how it was done, but someone was essentially trained to identify it. Yeah, and went in and quantified it and all that stuff. So it's all very doable.
Yes. Yep. And I did actually reference that, the fact that there were, I wish I had thought of the soy one, but I did reference the fact that there are devices that can measure odor just like you can measure noise in decibels. I didn't know that there was, so many picomoles per million or whatever it was, but did reference that. I'll have to put that in the Soyo thing in my back pocket though, because there were a lot of neighbors from both Littleton and Groton that were complaining because the way that the wind was blowing, that's where that noxious smell was going. And
my understanding is it wasn't cheap for them to resolve it.
Right.
And yet they had to resolve it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for tuning in on that, Chuck, and giving us that update. That's helpful. Hopefully they can resolve it before the weather gets even nicer.
Yeah. Sorry, I had to go dark on you guys for a little while there. There was one thing I wanted to bring up when Cheryl was on, but I can bring it up another time.
Okay. All right. Item number 10E, notice of intent for the Reuben Hoare Library Conservation Commission filing.
Okay, so the Conservation Commission, as well as and also similarly, plans were submitted to Planning Board. The Conservation Commission has a notice of intent that was due to be filed last Tuesday for the hearing. That'll be coming up later on in April. One of the things with the applications to the town permitting boards is that the town, being the owner of the property, needs to sign as applicant. And there was a question as far as exactly what the application to, say, conservation, the notice of intent entailed. The plans that were being submitted, maybe what exactly was part of that submission. So I had prepared a memorandum dated April 3rd that basically just summarized the application to the Conservation Commission, identified broadly what was within the packet, but then also made reference to some details of the plans that had changed since probably the board had last seen things, or at least since the fall or winter 2019. And some of those changes between the plans that were previously, say, before the town or the board and what is in front of the Conservation Commission with this filing, they made some changes that extended the parking lot while maintaining the same number of parking spaces. It reduced intrusion and the need for a retaining wall at the tennis court. It also eliminated some additional retaining walls near the fire road, removed a walking path, and that added some plantings rather than having the walking path and the retaining walls. The plans that were then included in the board's packet, one was entitled Landscape Plan Old and Landscape Plan New. And when you look at those, you can sort of see the changes that were made. And talking to Steve Moore with PMBC, he identified that the footprint had stayed the same. There was some value engineering done inside the library to reduce costs, to keep it more in budget, which had to deal more with finishes within the library, but that the overall program space has remained the same. I then also did include email from Brian Fors with Vertex that did get into a little bit more of an update as far as the library, where they are, as far as not only the plans, as I just mentioned, but also retaining a surveyor, and also that they're starting to review construction documents. Then again, those plans were attached to the packet, so you can sort of see between the two what those changes are. The newer plan is of higher quality, and that's why it's sort of larger in the board's packet than the smaller one. From a permitting standpoint, these plans still need to be peer reviewed. Planning and conservation will utilize the same peer consultant to review stormwater as well as general engineering practices. The packets included substantial submission as far as 299 pages. But a lot of it had to deal with the drainage calcs and the stormwater calcs and the appendices that are attached to those documents that the peer review consultant would be reviewing.
Okay, thanks for that summary, Joe. Did any board members have any questions or comments on this?
I had some comments on the timing of it. I just, I was frustrated that we got this in the 11th hour. It was, it's Sunday afternoon. Nina gets told she has to sign this thing by noon on Tuesday, and I just don't appreciate kind of being put under the gun, regardless of who it was. If somebody knew that this was coming, we could have gotten a heads up on this, and somebody could have told us that, hey, you can anticipate there's going to be something that we're going to need to act quickly on. It's lousy when we get something in the 11th hour and are expected to be under the gun and sign something in order to keep things moving forward. Just a personal preference, I guess. I just think it's I don't know.
Yeah,
respect.
I don't mind doing things under the gun, but I like to know, like, hey, you're going to get this. Just be ready to jump when you get it. Okay, cool. We can probably manage then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I had a conversation with Stephen more about making sure that we can provide more regular updates, especially because they would have known for a couple months that they're assembling the applications to planning and conservation, and that we should have a better idea as far as timeline. So that's where at the end of my memo, I did reference that we're going to coordinate with PMBC and staff to make sure that we can keep a better up-to-date on projects, and that way we can provide the board with monthly updates as far as where things are, and if there are significant issues or milestones, that you all can have those updates and know in advance rather than being surprised, because this would not have been something that was not on anyone's calendar. This should be on a timeline for permitting, and the board should be aware of those types of things.
Kind of surprised with Brian For's involved, because he's usually right on top of this kind of thing. Vertex is usually on top of this kind of thing.
Appreciate that, Joe. I appreciate you following up on that and providing us that summary. Any other comments from the board?
That detailed summary was great, Joe.
Yeah.
Really, really helpful.
Yeah. So we have a motion on this.
Now I got to find it again. I'm bogged down in one of the. Oh, there we go. I'll move to authorize the town administrator to sign the notice of intent application and planning board special permit application for the Reuben Hoare Library project.
Was there a second?
Paul seconded it, yeah.
Okay, great. So motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion?
I will just note that there is a comment in the box from Mark Rombacher, chair of the trustees of the library. And Mark, you wrote, and I think you're no longer muted. So through the chair, I defer to Cindy, but
sure.
Read his comment, or you can open it to
Mark, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
I share Chuck's concern. I had no idea that this was actually having to even come to you to a vote until now. We have been talking to the planning board and the conservation commission, and we've been figuring out when to be on their agenda since December. So the fact that we needed to be on your agenda, I don't know who dropped the ball, but this was all news to me, and we've never, I've been in meetings with Brian and the CM, and I had no idea about this. So I apologize that we didn't get to you, but it was news to everyone as far as I know, that we had to. So
we'll get you back, Mark.
I know you will.
Mark, I appreciate that sincerely. Thank you for that that clarification. All right, so we have a motion's been made and seconded. All right, so Joe?
Aye.
Chase?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Chuck? Cindy, aye. Okay, perfect.
Why are you
Motion
laughing?
is approved. What?
Why are you laughing at me?
How can I not?
Good point.
Okay, all right. So we are up to, what is this?
It's
Last
Item-
item under town administrator. This is just here in the event that any board members wanted to speak about anything that was in that new legislation that we had discussed earlier, where we had taken up a number of the different options, which Steve Venuti outlined for us. I think the only thing that strikes me that may be of interest to the board, and I'm sure you've seen it, is the option for restaurants that currently have liquor licenses to serve on premises through this pandemic are allowed to sell beverages to go as long as there's a food purchase. Of course, we've shared that information with our chief of police so that he's aware. I'm sure he's hearing it through his own channels. And we do not believe that there's any action that is required by our offices, by the Board of Selectmen as the local licensing authority, but should we learn otherwise, we'll definitely bring that forward to the board.
I have a really important clarifying question here. I had read it was beer and wine. Is it beer, wine, and cocktails?
I know.
No, and it's unfortunately beer and wine only.
unless you bring your own vessel.
I know. I'm with you on that, Chase. Okay.
So we did get clarification on that because there was some discussion about that on Saturday.
Beer and wine.
Okay.
Is that the bunny rabbit?
Can you? Oh, yeah. Never mind. All right.
Old tea, I think they call it in Chinatown. You know?
Old exactly, Paul. You know.
All right.
To talk to Sharon up at Taka for some cold tea.
Oh boy. I miss Taka.
Miss them all.
I miss the pub.
Oh.
Okay. So where are we at now?
I think are we at minutes?
We're at minutes, right?
Can I jump in real quick if you give me just like 2 minutes?
Sure.
Please. Just one of the things I wanted to bring up, and I think I texted Cheryl just to see if kind of to cover what she had covered, and I was trying to listen into both our meeting as well as the Board of Health in Groton. So I've been asking Cheryl kind of all along, just where are we at for FY 2020, and she seems like we're in pretty good shape, and we're on pace. And I saw some of the end of what Steve was talking about as far as what we're getting in for tax revenue and that kind of thing. And my big concern was for FY 21, and because we've got some, a couple of really large commercial properties that, if we take the Point for instance, there's not a whole lot of businesses that are open at the Point right now. And if those places are not able to pay Sam his rent, Sam pays us taxes based upon the rent that he receives from his tenants. I just want us to be prepared, whether we're going to look at doing some sort of deferment, whether we're going to work with, whether it's the IBMs of the world or the Potpourris or 1A Auto, Patriot Beverage. We've got some pretty significant commercial businesses in town that if they are looking for some help from the federal government, it's likely going to have a pretty significant impact on our budget and on our budget plan. So one of the things I'd like to ask for Cheryl and for her group to do, for them to look at, is maybe just give us a few revenue models and any budget adjustments, potential budget adjustments that they would see if the impact was X, Y, or Z. Just a few models to take a look at so that we can have as much information as possible in order to move forward. And this is something I think should be done in conjunction with FinCom, just to make sure that we stay in a solid financial place. I think we are in a good place, and the fact that we've done a good job with rainy day funds and that kind of thing, I'm confident in where we are. But I would like for us to kind of charge Cheryl and her team to put together some scenarios, some models, and some potential budget adjustments that we could or may need to take.
Okay.
That was it. I think I went over 2 minutes, but I apologize. I was using Gino's clock.
Clarifying question. So you definitely, you might have missed this because you were on the two different calls, but we did talk about having discussions about FY21 and potentially pulling back on different things that we had previously already agreed to do for that fiscal year. So that conversation would probably be developed into a larger conversation at a joint meeting, perhaps on the 21st of April with FinCom, or if we can somehow schedule it earlier for April 13th, if that's even possible to take up. The only question I had for you, Chuck, is whether or not, I assume you're just simply referring to revenue models, but not necessarily asking the finance department. I just want to seek clarification as far as the opportunities for businesses. In other words, I assume you're not also looking for the finance office to evaluate the risks, short of just strictly looking at the revenue, and as opposed to comparing legislation and opportunities for businesses to get funding, just simply looking at the revenue, what our scenarios could be, correct?
So yes, so looking at, and Cheryl, I know she deals with Ed Mullen, and she looks at how many permits we have to try to, and she works with Kathy and she works with Debbie to try to establish, where we're at and where we're trending and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I would just like to be extremely conservative and mm-hmm. try to look at the potential that we're not going to realize the same level of revenue mm-hmm. because there are people because of COVID that are not paying the bills, frankly.
Right, no doubt.
And ours is one of those bills that's not going to get paid. And mm-hmm. it's great to hear Steve say that hasn't been the case. And we've got, 75%, I think was the number he threw out there, which is fantastic. But I hope that, I would like to try to be as prepared as possible, and take some measures now with hopes that we won't have to implement any, budget adjustments or any actions. But sure. I'd like to be prepared to take those actions if necessary.
Yeah. Thank you for the clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Good point. Okay, so we're on to minutes. Did anyone have any comments on the minutes?
Good job, Chase.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry, I haven't gotten the minutes done from our meeting midweek last week, but I'll get those out to you guys at some point here in the next week.
Appreciate it.
I thought the minutes from Tuesday were more important, or from Saturday rather, were more important to finish.
Right.
Okay, so we have a motion.
I'll move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the meeting minutes of March 23rd and April 4th, 2020.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, Joe?
Aye.
Chase?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Chuck?
Aye.
Cindy? Aye. Okay, motion is approved as written. And now we are on to executive session.
Madam Chair, we given the lateness of the hour, I mean, should we really, I don't know how long this conversation is going to go, or whether or not we should consider waiting till the 13th to act on this. I'm curious whether other people feel the same thing I do. It's almost 10:30.
Wow.
I actually think it's going to be pretty quick.
Oh, all right. If that's the case, then fine.
Yeah,
Based on what I know of the topic.
yeah. I think it's going to be I don't think it's going to be a long conversation, Paul, personally. And
Well,
I'd rather.
if I'm not off, you will warn, all right?
Okay, so to the, okay, so just to the, anyone,
Before we jump into it, we have to take the motion with the executive session, but this is our first time going to an executive session in a Zoom, right?
right,
So let's just make sure before we have any discussions that whatever switches need to be flipped, we flip
Yeah,
it.
so this is Joe. I have host abilities. So once we do the motion, we have the roll call. I'll then go and manually put people out of the meeting, and LCTV will then also stop recording and then exit the meeting. So it's just board members and Ann Essman who would be joining us for executive session.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe.
Just give me like a minute to get everything stopped and.
okay.
Fine, Judith.
Thank you.
Then I'll move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body, and the chair so declares, and to not reconvene in open session thereafter.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Roll call vote. Joe?
Aye.
Chase?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Chuck?
Aye.
Cindy? Aye. Okay, great. So we are signing off to anyone who is not going to participate in the executive session motion hearing, and we will not be coming back online. So.
Stay safe.